important to have a plan and understand what your goals are.
In fact, my camel out there is suffering right now with a broken back.
So I actually found Pepe when it was only a couple of hours old, and I'm like, oh, this is a funny meme.
Oh my god.
Yo! Who is this Degen?
The old man is swing trading over years at a time. And it's like, that's where the real money is made.
The answer is a permanent loss. With single-sided staking, you don't have to worry about impermanent loss.
If you're aware, if you're disciplined, you can hone that into further financial growth.
Financial freedom, to where you can actually live life and not have to be constantly living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, more or less, right?
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and D-gentlemen of all ages. I am Zenith, your host for tonight, and we are back for another book club edition, and we are talking about The Sovereign Individual tonight. Shout out to Charlie of Cultivate Crypto. He was the one that turned me on to this book. He's a bit of a mentor, and we like him a lot around these parts. But again, hello, I'm Zenith. I'm a bit of a legal and government analyst over here at the Degen Roundtable, and I'm joined by an excellent crew of folks tonight to talk about this excellent book and get into some good discussion, starting off with my co-host, although tonight he's a special guest apparently, Mr. Will Stevenson. How you doing, my man?
I am doing fantastic, and I love being a special guest. Mrs. Producer, you should. Oh, dang it, she fixed it. We pulled it. We tried pulling the fast one on her, but she caught along. I'm doing great. This was a fantastic book. I read this book, probably years ago when I first heard Charlie recommend it when I was in the crypto mindset course, and actually, I think he recommended it to me in person because I was hanging out with him and Miguel over in Vegas. We were shooting the shit over at the Cosmo. And he was like, dude, you should read this book. And I was like, bro, this is a great fucking book. So shout out to Charlie. Cultivate Crypto, Charlie with the Crypto Mindset course. Those dudes are excellent, both him and Miguel. But this book like changed my life, man. And it's all about, like, you know, in the red pill manosphere place, everyone talks about, like, you know, the money muscles game frame, those things. And the sovereign individual is about like frame of people and how people are moving more towards sovereignty, which is like, it's all the same, like it's all the same idea. Frame as an individual, frame as a nation, frame as a whole bunch of like particular people working inside of systems and stuff. And this book does a really good job of like breaking down the framework of how people interact and how they fit into their society at large. So I'm super stoked to get into it. I'm super happy to see you all here. And for the folks at home who don't know me, again, my name is Will Stevenson. I'm a traveling iron worker, and I like talking about cryptocurrency and personal improvement in my free time. Looks like we got some other people on the panel, though. We got Nate McGettit. Nate, how's it going, broski?
Oh, it's going good. It's going good. Pretty nice day out. So, you know, I enjoyed being out there in that lovely weather. But yeah, no, my thoughts on this book are... Oh, what was
the temperature?
It's 50 at its hottest.
Oh.
Yeah, but this is November. It should be 20 at max. So
fair enough. That is a beautiful day then.
Yes. No snow too. The snow that we got did not stick. So interesting. But
perfect.
Gonna be another one. But yeah, no, this is one of my favorite books that I've ever had the pleasure of listening to. The interesting thing that I found about this one is they tend to use the logic of violence to form societies, which then tend to kind of like go bounce from centralized to decentralized back to centralized. And it's really interesting how these almost like human cycles just go on through thousands of years, and they do get into that quite a bit, and then they use that prediction to create a model of like, here's what we think in the future. And the craziest part about this was written in 1997, and there are so many things that are like coming true. You know, it's like, whoa, oh, yeah. This is scary stuff.
The authors were definitely ahead of their time in a lot of aspects. They got a lot of stuff right. They got a few things wrong, but like close misses. So I'm not really going to count it against them. But at the end of the day, I think this is our kind of third book when it comes to the category of like historical cycles. So we had this one, We had The Great Wave, which we covered recently, and then if you remember back, we covered The Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. I think these 3 books kind of all work together to kind of tell a unified story about history's past. So I'm curious to get into some dissection with you good people here and really get into that. But other than that, we do have one more person on the panel. Mrs. McGettit, how's it going?
Hey, it's going good. So I guess I'll just launch right into the book
I was
stuff.
going to say cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. Bye. See you later. Will, you are muted, my friend. Yeah. Well, he
There we
figures
go.
that out.
I was just gonna say, for the folks at home who don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah,
in case
yeah,
they've never seen you before.
I'm getting there. I'm a little distracted. Soren's upstairs making a lot of noise, so Nate had to go
Gotcha.
take care of that. But yeah, I am Mrs. McGettit. I am the producer for the channel. I do things like our thumbnails and a lot of background work and etc. etc. And I am one of the panelists for the book club because I love books. And now I'm reading too many books. I got these books every week, and I'm reading my own books that I read just for fun. So all of the books. But no, this book was fantastic. Nate has had this one for a really long time. So we already had it on Audible. So that was neat. We didn't have to pay any money to get it. Very, very, very long, but I did it 2x speed in the last 2 days. Right now, not a ton of it is like being, right at the forefront of my brain, but I know it'll come back as we talk about it. One of my favorite things was this book gave me a lot of hopium in the idea of, weirdly enough, because there was a lot of really negative like predictions that basically are true, but there's also some that are very positive that I'm pretty sure are going to be true or have already pretty much kind of proven true that we'll get into, and I'm really excited for that. So yeah, great read. Listen, I guess, whatever you want to call it.
Consumption in whatever form it may be. But agreed. Yeah. Shout out to everybody that actually got through the book this week. You are part of an elite club because, yes, it was 19 hours long at one time speed. So applause to everybody out there that got through it. It's also very dense too. So that's a dense 19 hours. It's not super fluffy. So hats off to everybody that got through it and understood it. Other than that, though, I do want to go around the horn one time and ask everybody what their favorite part of the book or a part that just like really just struck you was. Will, what you got?
So I've got 2 of them. One is like just a silly thing that I started thinking about. And in the beginning of the book, he talks a lot about Y2K and the things that happen as a result of it. And so while that part of the book wasn't really like terribly interesting for me, it got me down like a rabbit hole of thinking about like what are the things that I'm talking about today that are evergreen and that are always going to be good, and what are the things that I'm talking about like it's only topical right now. Like I start to think about all the podcasts that we do about Gary Gensler and how horrible of a individual he is and how much fun we have like making fun of him. And it's like people who are getting into crypto 6 months from now, if they see that podcast, they're not going to think anything of it. They're going to be like, who the fuck is Gary Gensler? Why do I care about that? Because it's not going to be topical anymore. He'll be gone. So like this book started making me think about like what's the stuff that I think of and what's the stuff that I say out loud and that I breathe life into the universe that just doesn't matter, or that's only like it's only the topic du jour, or like it's not going to hold up, and how much of the stuff I talk about is evergreen, how much of the stuff I talk about is going to be relevant forever. So that part of the book, like that really got me. And then the other part that I like is just his specific again, this was written in 1997. This was over 15 years before, like, or not 15 years, almost 15 years from like when Bitcoin was created. And he was saying the phrase private key, public key. And that like right there, that was super cool. And I love that he used that language for describing like, online internet transaction is, and it's like, wow, like I don't know much about the history of cryptography or how long they've been using that language, but like that was something that I thought was really cool. So those are the 2 things that stuck out to me a lot in the book, was like his specific usage of like very particular words that are very relevant now, and then the idea of what do we talk about has longevity. So that was it for me. What about Nate and Mrs. Producer? What were your guys's thoughts on the book? I'm going to presume Nate is still upstairs dealing with Soren. Mrs. Producer, are you available for ideas and thoughts and things?
Actually, we're gonna trade. Nate's coming right now, and I'm gonna go take care of Soren for a little bit. So
Okie dokie.
skip me on this one. I'll just give my answer really, really quick. Same thing I already mentioned. What he brings up that really stood out to me was the idea that the taxes imposed on the common citizen in America right now are, quite frankly, they're horrible. And he makes a lot of predictions and statements about, like entry taxes and exit taxes that are legitimately a thing. If you actually go and look into this, if you move out of America, they're going to tax you even if you're not here. Like it's kind of nuts. But the part that gave me hopium is he does bring it up that when it comes to the World Wide Web and the internet, he doesn't think that this same kind of thing will really be possible just because it's so big and it would be so difficult and so impossible to be able to do that. But anyways, I'm going to disappear for a bit and I will send a message to the private chat when I'm back.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right, I will take over from here.
Yeah.
The very first time that I read this book was the summer of 2022. And I got to the chapter about the death of the nation state and how the transfer to the modern age is going to have this weird experience where previous like all power governments are almost going to be on equal footing and competing and fighting with like individuals that have the ability to almost be sovereign just due to the size of their wealth and their power and their capabilities. When I was reading this chapter, this was exactly at the same time that the news came out about the Ukrainian war and how the U.S. government was trying to brand Elon Musk a traitor because Elon Musk was not giving them access to Starlink to help the Ukrainians. It was this wild moment where the U.S. government was literally in a fight with a singular man, Elon Musk, to get him to give his personal property to help a war of their own interest over in Ukraine. Yeah. And that it was one of those moments that just like, it just struck me. And I was like, oh,
that's what
I get it
about.
now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Dude.
It was wild to see. That is one of the things that definitely stands out in my mind. But other than that, though, to put in context what you were talking about earlier, this book was written in 1997. I'm pretty sure Bitcoin came out in like November or December of 2008. So this book that was written
15 years,
before the internet was even popularized came up with the idea of cryptocurrency, or just pretty much Bitcoin, 11 years in advance, with an entire step of technology between them that didn't even exist yet, or wasn't popularized yet anyways. So that's the kind of stuff we talk about when we say that this book was really ahead of its time.
Yeah, they were certainly, they had the foresight. Nate, I don't know if you heard the question that Zenith asked earlier, but he was asking like, what was there any part of the book that stuck out to you or was super memorable or anything like that?
For me, it was actually several parts. About every single time, a new type of society would pop up, it was always the new technology generally that allowed people to then become like sovereign, right? Which then created victims, because these people would just run around and you got the bad apples that run around and do whatever they wanted. So if it creates enough victims, then all of a sudden people started like transforming back over to like, the church or the state eventually, and, nation states and all that, to being like, okay, it's a centralized thing now. And then from there, people will be like, hey, this is too much now because of all the taxation and stuff that the people did not want. And so, just kind of listening in on the all the historical, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Like historical
events, historical times, historical times in history, right? That people basically, they came up with a new idea, and all of a sudden, you can't beat these random outsiders now that are coming up with their own ways. Kind of like the stirrups. That was a great example. But
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for the folks at home who don't necessarily recognize that reference, what Nate's talking about is like, there was a point where stirrups were invented and like people were able to like ride on horses and not have to use both hands and both feet. And they were now able to swing a sword from on top of a horse, and they could like direct the horse with one hand while like doing the fighting
I think the Mongols, stuff. Right? The Mongols, that's basically kind of what they were doing there. Another big one that I thought was really cool was the idea of gunpowder. So that way you kind of level the playing field, where the way it used to be is, as a peasant with a pitchfork versus a knight with heavy armor and a sword and all that on horseback. It's like you'd have to have at least 30 of these guys just to take down one knight. Good luck with that. Versus having a gun and cannons and all that eventually was like, well, yeah, good luck if you have a sword at that point.
he had a really good analogy for that too, to liken it to the modern age. It'd be like if everyone had to buy a $100,000 weapon in order to defend themselves, and if you couldn't, then you had to rely on your wealthy friends who had one. And so basically everyone just formed around their wealthy friends and it was like, hey, like I'll hang out next to you and I'll pay you like tribute and stuff if you just like stop me from getting raped and robbed by all the guys who do have this $100,000 weapon. And so I thought that was a really cool analogy. But yeah, dude, that's
the Vikings right there.
Yeah.
That it is. Tell you what, gents, do we have the ability to do the part of the show for the people?
We do. We do have the part of the show. The ability for the part of the show. Then. It's time for motherfucking chat shoutouts, ladies and germs. Let's hear it for all of you at home talking to us. I think, yeah, that's all I got to do. And it looks like, oh, hang on. We do not have Mrs. Producer with us, so I'm going to be a quick little Mr. Producer. Let me pull up my production screen. This is going to be really tricky for me because I'm going to hear myself twice. So I'm going to stop talking, and as soon as I start pulling these chats up, Zenith, that's when
I will take it away. Sounds good, brother. All right, number one, we got Agent J, one of our very own, coming in. He says, tell you what, these dudes definitely had a crystal ball into the future. That they did. And shout out to Jay. You might notice that the book actually has a preface written by one of your favorite people. It's hard to see because my green screen, but that's right, Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel actually wrote the preface to this book. So there you go. Your boy was shilling gold even back in the day. All right, up next we got Broats. He's saying, your boy is here, coming in with the raccoon holding us up. I like that profile picture. It's a fun one. What else we got? We got Brendan, another one of our very own, Degen Roundtable member. He says, I didn't get to read this yet, but I have it queued up on my Audible list next. It is a good one, for sure. It's a fun romp through history for the first third of it, and then you get to the modern age stuff, and they give you the vision, and then they also give you the counter vision, so to speak. So it's a good read. Again, I will reiterate, it's 19 hours long, so just be prepared. Up next, we got Will Stevenson, another Degen coming in here saying, like that smash button, or button smash that like, as his brother likes to say, Sam. And we even got Crypto Dave coming in. He says, gunpowder also made city walls obsolete. This is true. The gunpowder helped invent the cannon. Cannons helped take down walls. Because back in the day, it kind of was, if you were able to build a castle, you pretty much had the ability to rule a good chunk of land around you just because you had just a defensible fortress, pretty much. Other than that, though, we do, Agent J coming back, he says, the Peters can be insufferable, but Teal is not so bad. That's true, that's true. And then, by the way, I don't know if you can see it or not, but we do have some original chats from earlier on. We have Crypto Crossfire, Funkmaster Hex, and Centurion 54X.
Oh, looks like Mrs. Producer's back. I'm giving you the wheel.
There we go. All right, we're changing hot swap. Crypto Crossfire saying, first, Puro Pinche Hex. I think I can't remember what that means exactly, but I'm pretty sure
it's a token. He's doing a token shout out.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, Hex, Richard Hart coins. Yeah, we like those around here. I think they're actually having a pretty damn good week, if I do say so myself.
Oh yeah.
So obviously this is not the crypto show, but we might chat about it a little bit. Who knows? Up next we got Funkmaster Hex. He says, ladies and gentlemen, good evening with the whiskey glass. Salute to you, my man. Hope you're doing well. Enjoying a good Friday night. And then last but not least, we got a bit of a fan favorite over here. 54 Cent himself. He says, gonna catch the replay. Have a great weekend, Degens. I hope you have a great weekend too. Don't let the alfalfa catch on fire. We'll catch you later.
Replay gang.
Replay gang. All right, that is all we got. Folks, do we have any final notes we want to hit before we give a brief summary and then dive into our talking points? Our talking points for tonight are going to be this book's cycle theory, how it interacts with all the other cycle theories we talked about, the modern age predictions, and then the counterpoints to the modern age predictions, aka what the book thinks are going to be the factors pressing against the changing of the age, and then also any points that we think the author may have overlooked, understated, or just forgotten.
I've got a quick little collection of quotes here that have no context and are just kind of fun on their own. Is that the Eskimos punish people who engage in overkill. They shun the people who kill too much of the nature, like more than they can eat. And people tend to react to incentives, and violence is the ultimate boundary force on behavior. Those are the only little things that I got. Those are my little fun quotes from the book. So that's what I got. Go ahead and launch into your synopsis, broski.
Fair enough. Alrighty. So the book starts off with giving you their synopsis of the last 2,000 years. They talk about how we gone from hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural societies to industrial societies, and then finally we're moving towards informational societies. So the first couple of chapters talk about the different ages and each of the different changes in there. And then when we get to the modern age, we get to some of the chapters that talk about what they believe is going to be the death of the nation state, which is the end point of the most recent age.
I don't mean to cut you off, but your mic is doing something funky, and it's like you're underwater, sort of.
There we go. It's back.
There we go.
All right. So hunter-gatherers, agricultural, industrial, informational. Last part of the industrial society age is going to be the nation-state age. This is pretty much going to be the last 100 years, so to speak, all of the 1900s, and it's where you analyze the idea of how the nation-state has really been progressing since the 1500s. It evolved into what it is today, and then what theoretically is going to be the ultimate death or transition away from the nation-state. They might not entirely die, but they are going to change to what the author believes is the informational stage. Then after that, we get to some of the details of the informational stage and the pushback on the informational stage, whether it be the nation-states that are dying or trying to resist the transition, and the Neo-Luddites or the New Luddites. So if you remember from some past history lessons, the Luddites have traditionally been people that resist technological change and try to push for their own interests to remain, even though they've become outdated and less efficient than what is available through the current technology. That is what we end up with there for your brief synopsis. So with that being said, let's get into the first point, which is I want to talk about how this book falls into our trifecta, if you will. So last week, or 2 weeks ago, actually, we covered the Great Wave. The Great Wave was talking about how there are multiple waves where it starts off with a period of stable prices, unnoticed inflation, hyperinflation, and then you get to a peak, and then it starts to deflate slightly, and then you get to stable prices again. And then one of the things that book talks about is how you leave stable prices and move to inflation once you have an increase in population for whatever reason it is. But that starts to lead to the inflation because there's just more people competing for the same amount of basic resources like food, fuel, shelter. And then ultimately, when you hit the top of the wave, and what causes it to break is some sort of external factor, or sometimes it can be an internal factor. So a lot of times it's literally like famine, bad years for crops harvest, disease like the Black Plague, and then sometimes it's even stuff like the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, where you get to the point where there's just so much conflict and strife that it causes things to level out for a good amount of time. So we have that one. Then we also have a quick synopsis of Changing World Order. This one talks about how the Changing World Order shifts when you have 3 different cycles all line up at the same time. You have internal strife, external strife, and monetary strife. So the idea is that if your government hyperinflates your currency, especially if you're the world reserve currency, and you have an internal conflict at the same time, and if your internal conflict matches up with another larger internal conflict, aka an external conflict, then that is where you see the times change and the world reserve currency change. So for the sovereign individual, I will read what the author posits for the thing that they talk about. Here we go. Points to keep in mind when trying to understand the information revolution. A shift in foundations of power unfolds far in advance of the actual revolutions in use of power. Incomes are falling when a major transition begins. People are blind to the logic of violence in their existing society, so they're blind to the changes in that internal logic. Mega political changes are not recognized before they happen. Major transitions always involve a cultural revolution and usually entail clashes between adherents to the old age and new values. Mega political changes are Mega political changes are never popular because they antiquate intellectual capital and break down established moral imperatives. Transitions to the new ways of organizing life happen in pieces, starting with the catalyst of change. Transitions will always involve periods of social chaos and heightened violence due to disorientation and a breakdown of the old system. Corruption, moral decline, and inefficiency appear to be signal features of the final stages of a system. The growing importance of technology in shaping the logic of violence has led to history accelerating, where each transition happens faster than the last one. And finally, the four main pieces to understanding megapolitical changes is 1, topography, the changes or the control and makeup of land. Number 2 is climate. Changes in climate can lead to major shifts in power. Next up, we have microbes and disease. These can cause radical changes in power due to the population shrinking in size rapidly. And then finally, technology plays the largest and most impactful role in the new the new mega political changes. There we go. We got through it. God. All right. So, my question to the panel: how do you guys think that this view of the changing age lines up to any of the previous ones we've talked about? Where do you see similarities, differences? What do you think is more correct, less correct? What do you got?
Yeah, one of the things I think would be kind of an interesting parallel is usually when it comes to like inflation, that also has to do with like more people, right? Safer environments. That also would connect with, well, people have had enough of small bands and being in small villages, so they all go to the cities or the churches and stuff, and then there's a big large centralized entity, right? So you could almost say it's like some kind of bubble, really, where you have more power, and people flock to that power to be safe from marauders, and then from there they start making some kind of currency, and they need to make more and more and more of that, which everybody loves for a while. And then eventually, though, it gets to kind of like a peak where now there's not high enough wages for people to live comfortably anymore. And so now the living conditions start going down, in which then they get more rowdy. The populace, I should say, gets more rowdy. so then these centralized entities now have to exert forcible control over the populace, which causes people to not want to be there. And so that gets the innovative wheels, mother of necessity, right? Then creates some kind of new technology that then allows people to go outside of the power structure of the centralized source. And if you take that formula, that's basically all 3 books right there.
Interesting. Okay. Will, what you got?
The thing that I thought, your question was, how is what's in the book similar to like what happens now, or something along those lines?
How do you compare contrast it to the other books that we've read? So whether it's the New Changing World Order or the Great Wave, and then now we have the Sovereign Individual. How do they're all kind of like cycle or wave theories, trying to describe the ebbs and flow in time and how power shifts during each of those periods.
Yeah. All right.
Like, are there any similarities or major differences that you point out between them when you put them all next to each other?
As far as similarities or differences, I'm frankly running a blank as to what the other books were about.
We'll tell you what.
Mostly.
I'll jump in here real quick. Let's talk about timeline.
Okay.
So, Sovereign Individual, this one, the timeline that it suggests is, it's kind of like about 400 to 500 year increments. Yeah. So it starts off with the hunter-gatherer societies. So a lot of this stuff is going to be like before 0 BC or in some unmodernized, and that's a very relative term here, the unmodern periods of Europe and Asia, anytime pretty much before 800 BC or 800 AD, excuse me.
Yeah.
That's when we shift to the agricultural revolution. This is where we start to see the rise of feudalism and the feudal societies, which are based on agriculture, because they actually develop some technology to store food long periods of time. After that, then we get to the point where we get to the Renaissance, marked by the printing press. This is where you actually see a shift in power from the very recently ascended Catholic Church to the Protestant Reformation and the great schisms between all the different sects of Christianity, And then ultimately we get towards the modern age, which is we start to see the Industrial Revolution, and now we even see the Information Revolution, which is telling times of another shift in that period. Yeah. When it comes to the changing world order, what this one focuses on is what is the dominant world's reserve currency. And this one talks about how, like, in the 1400s, 1500s, it was Spain was the world reserve currency. Then it moved to the Netherlands for about the next 200 years. And then we had 200 years of the British pound. And then finally, we've arrived at the American dollar, which has pretty much been dominant for about 200 years. And then a bit of an outlier when it comes to the timeline here is actually the Great Wave, because this book talks about how it's not necessarily time dependent, because some of the waves lasted a lot longer than others. So in particular, the wave between, the mid to late 1700s and then the late 1800s to get to the Victorian era, that is one of the waves. But another one of the waves is from like 1350 all the way to the mid 1700s. That's where we start off with like the Renaissance, and then we get to the Enlightenment, and that's where we get to Enlightenment to Victorian era. So the timelines seem very different, but are they able to articulate the reasons for the difference, or is it just, does it feel kind of arbitrary? Like, if you guys had to pick one of those three timelines that seems more reasonable, which would it be?
I think they all kind
industrial.
The
which
what?
one?
The industrial. If you look back right around the industrial age from the it's about 1890s to into the 1940s, or actually I should probably move that up to the 1960s technically. That's when you really, like, if you take that timeline, that's when you see a huge change in just about everything. And that's that timeline of technology, right? And the industrial revolution created better, more comfortable lives for everybody, but then also it allowed everything to start speeding up to where people are now comfortable enough where they don't have to work as hard out in the fields, where then they start creating, or they start thinking more, they have more time to think, which then they start creating more ideas, more inventions, and that's the speed up into the information age now. And that's all a part of the exponential rise of all this as well.
That's true. I think
if that answers your question.
It does a bit. The exponential rise is definitely something that's laid out in Sovereign Individual, where the author talks about how the further you get into history, or the farther on history goes to, like, the closer to day and age and beyond from here, the faster the transitions are going to happen, which makes sense, because in the past things had to move at the speed of pretty much word of mouth through merchants that were traveling between different lands, and then they had to convey the information of other lands to the land that they're currently in, and then eventually we move on to a little bit quicker transitions of information, and then eventually we get to the early 1900s, where you obviously have the invention of, like, telegraph, radio, and then ultimately TV, the internet, that kind of stuff, and satellites. So the information absolutely only moves one direction when it comes to speed. But overall, I think that the books, they describe history in different ways. Will, do you have a certain pick for which book do you think describes the cycles of history the best? You are muted, my man.
I am muted. My goodness. I normally don't mute myself because I find that being host, you shouldn't mute, but in co-host it's different. So I'm going to probably be tripping on that. But I like the Sovereign Individual book the best. So that's the one that I'm going to reference when it comes to, like, which history is, I think, the most accurate. And I'm not judging it based off of the substance of the history or the quality of the way that they present the information. It's just the book that, like, that I feel the most interested in. And so, like, that's my default position. It's like, I'm going to choose the thing that makes me feel good, And I do like the Sovereign Individual. So that's the one that I would probably say of the three of them: the Great Wave, the Sovereign Individual. Oh shoot, was a freaking
Changing World Order.
Changing World Order. Yeah, the Ray Dalio one. That one was still pretty good. But that one was nice and short as well. I think I listened to the Ray Dalio read of that, but freaking I do like the Sovereign Individual best, and that's the one, like, they speak the most about the stuff that I find most relatable, and so, like, that's just what my default answer is going to be. And you guys already know my thesis. Say again?
They speak more about like the human element, the human
Yeah,
experience.
they speak more about the human element for sure, and I think that that's the thing that I like to focus on a lot is the human element and the way that people interact and all of that stuff more so than like the numbers and the statistics and the things like that. So that's the part that like I'm going to be biased against the thing that I enjoy, and I recognize that because I think that like I'll harken back to my theory that everything's a campfire story, including books. And the book that I think tells the best story is the one that I'm going to choose to believe in because I know that like if I consume any sort of information anywhere about stuff that I don't have a deep, vast knowledge of, I'm going to just default believe that it's true. I think the Myers-Briggs or no, the Gell-Mann media effect is the thing where it's like we tend to believe um it's a similar in concept to what I'm trying to describe. Let me see if I can land the plane here. So the Gell-Mann amnesia effect is when you deal with information sources that you know are biased when you're a subject matter expert on the things that they talk about. And then when they talk about something that you don't know anything about, you're like, "Oh, wow, that must be true." So like for instance, we'll take, CNN and Trump's CNN and Trump, right? If CNN is talking about like, "Oh, Trump's an evil bad man and he's from Russia and he's actually a communist and you should watch out and not let him be president," and I happen to know like, "Oh, Trump's not from Russia and he's not a communist," so CNN's full of a bunch of shit. But then CNN like brings out a super cool article about like, "Oh, you can make a cake this, that, and the other way by adding these ingredients." I'll be like, "Wow, I didn't know you can make a cake this, that, and the other way." It's like when they've proven liarship in something that you're subject matter expert in, and you're like, these people are full of shit. But when they talk about something you're not a subject matter expert in, it's like, "Oh wow, that must be true. These guys are an authoritative information source." So like, not to say that they're lying or they're telling the truth about the cake making. That's totally irrelevant. The fact is that you default believe them when they talk about stuff you don't know anything about. So what I'm trying to relate to in my analogy is that I enjoy this book more so than the other ones. And so because I enjoy the information that they're giving me and I'm not a subject matter expert on the stuff they're talking about, I'm going to default presume that like what all of these books say are true. And the books that I don't remember are the ones that didn't make me feel a certain type of way. So essentially that information is gone and out of my head. But the information from this book that I enjoy is going to have more longevity and I'm going to have more of a bias towards it. So like I'm going through the meta analysis of my own reasoning here, and it has nothing to do with the substance of the facts. It has everything to do with the fact that I enjoyed this book. So like I'm
Fair
falling right
enough.
into my own little campfire story thesis there. But anyways, I don't want to take up the entire book club talking about why I like the things that I like. But that is my bias. And I'll there's something that I wanted to bring up, and that's when they were talking about the church and its influence on people and how folks like and how they're comparing the church of the 1500s to the politics of today, and how that's like there's a super comparable zeitgeist of the public and the disdain that the public has for that element of control, because the church used to be in like massive control and they used to be super hypocritical in all the stuff that they were doing, and they did a bunch of bad things and the people got sick of it, and eventually the people revolted and they went a different way, and people stopped being like as Christian or as Catholic or as like Martin Luther wrote his 95 theses, and there was like a massive split away from the church because of all the hypocrisy and stuff going on. So like that was something that I thought was super duper worthy of recognition that the book was talking about, and that's a major point of historical inflection. And yeah, Agent J, folks find their own religion somehow. Yeah, it's absolutely right. Like this is the world that we're finding ourselves in now. It's no longer about large entities in control. Now it's more about sovereign individuals. It's more about people finding their own paths. And another thing they talked about in the book on the topic of religion is that the people that focus the most on like do this, do that, this is taboo, this is not taboo, they were always the people in the lower socioeconomic brackets. They were the people that didn't have the money. The rich people did whatever the fuck they want.
The peasants.
The peasants, yeah, the peasants are the ones that are like, oh, I can't do this because it's unholy, or I can't do this, that, and the other thing because it's like it's socially not norm. The people with money, the people with power, the people with wealth, with economic energy, whatever you want to call it, right? The people with means, they just did whatever the fuck they want because they're like, I have the means, I can do it. The people that are poor worry about the moral and the religious justifications and things, and the people that are wealthy worry about their sovereignty. And like, I'll harken this back to your example you were talking about earlier, Zenith, with Elon Musk, and saying basically, fuck you, government, I'm not giving you access to my private shit because you want to go kill some people in another place that has nothing to do with me. No, you can fuck right out of here. It's the same sort of ethos. It's like Elon Musk, if he was like a poor or like a religious person, then he would be like, oh, I must do this for God and country. It is the just thing to do to help my patch of dirt that has a whole bunch of people in charge that say they want to go hurt these people on this other patch of dirt. But because he is wealthy, because he has means of his own, he's not just going to fall into that, preset area of thinking. So like, this is something for the folks at home to consider. If you know that you're not wealthy, if you know that you're poor, if you know that you're easily manipulatable by clergy, by politics, by nationalism, by any sort of like, warm and fuzzy campfire story that people in charge tell you, then like, this book would probably help you recognize that fact. If you have the ability to if you have the self-awareness to be able to take yourself out of your own shoes and look at yourself and be like, oh snap, I'm incredibly like taboo focused, or I'm incredibly like, you don't do that because it's written down in a book somewhere that some people wrote a long time ago, or this, that, and the other thing. So like, people that fall for dogma, people not fall for, people that are subject to taking extreme action based on dogma or theology, or some sort of like great feeling of I owe this to this culture, this nation, this religion, this whatever, this tribe. Like, they generally end up on the lower end of the they're generally on the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder. And as you climb out of that, then you tend to have more sovereignty. You tend to have more free thinking. And even to the point where in the religions, they're talking about like how evil the people are that become wealthy, how evil the people are that don't focus on all this stuff. So anyways, I'm monologuing right now. And this is a lot of topics and conversations.
You got some very good points. The chapter specifically around the death of the church and the rise of the nation state was an interesting one for sure. There's even some spicy examples about how this is really a perfect example of how towards the end of an age you're going to start to see the structures and the institutions become bloated and inefficient and even hypocritical or heretical, as in this case, which is they finish off this chapter, I'm pretty sure, by recounting the time that the Pope in France in the late 1400s had a competition to find the most skilled prostitute in all of Paris and they measured it by how many clergymen they could satisfy. Yeah. I was like, wow, that doesn't sound very churchly at all. But that is an example. Exactly. It's an example of how a system that existed for a purpose became inefficient, bloated, and hypocritical at a certain point. But the other issue that you pointed toward there is that it's kind of the issue of, or the idea that people are like liquid, in which they will adhere to the container that they are able to exist in. Which is that if you're a peasant, you are going to adhere to the duties, requirements, and social obligations of a peasant. If you are a merchant, you will adhere to that. And if you're rich and able to escape the controls or restrictions of the lower classes, you're going to adapt to the container that you can fit, which is theoretically almost infinite or so vast that you are now able to rival the existing institutions of the time. What I'm saying is that it's what you said earlier, which is that if in like the 1400s, 1300s, maybe even early 1500s, if you were wealthy enough, you could escape some of the stigma or the responsibilities that maybe the peasants or the working man had to adhere to at the time. And because you had the power and wealth and the ability to, you could operate outside of those societal norms.
You fucking hit the nail on the head, bro.
No, was this the only time that you kind of saw this stuff, or do you think that these ideas, that the higher you are on the socioeconomic ladder in any age, you'll be able to escape those sort of responsibilities or stigma?
I think it's all about power.
Go ahead, Nate.
It's just the power structure, you know. I mean, the more force you can exert on a group of people, the more powerful you technically are, because those people would then, and that force could be anything like, say, social media likes, right? Or, you know, it could be guns. But regardless of that, when you get that power, it's up to you then to choose what you want to do with it. And that's where people start building centralized entities, right? And start attracting more people to that centralized place, which is you. The difference is, and I think this is where they talk about the sovereign individual versus these large, massive centralized entities, is literally the size. Because you can have a family, right? I got a family of 3 right here. Okay, what's my power level? You know, it's pretty small, but these 2 will go where I go. There we go. That's the centralized entity right there is me. I'm also a sovereign individual. At least I try to be as much as possible. Okay, what about the centralized entity that is the United States government? That's a lot of people, right? And that's a lot of force that they literally basically control the world. So
to a degree, yeah. I think what the book lays out is the idea that up until recently, like last 30 years, so to speak, the idea of being a truly sovereign individual with the ability to rival the nation states has not been physically possible. You can do things like what Will was alluding to earlier, which is like, if you're rich enough, you technically can kind of like skirt the rules a little bit, especially with the Catholic Church, if you just pay them enough, that kind of stuff. But now we're moving into an era where it's like you are truly free and able to rival the power, not necessarily like straight up militarily, because I mean, until you have private ownership of nuclear weapons, it's not going to happen, or the destruction of all nuclear weapons, which is also not going to happen. But now you're at this level where you have the ability and you have the power and influence to rival certain nation states. Maybe not like the top 3 in the world, but definitely like be like a mid-50 country when it comes to presence on the world stage as an individual.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic you brought up there. Is
we'll hit that one later on when we get to the modern age.
Oh, okay. Because
sorry,
I'm talking about
early transition. My bad. I will say this though, Will, you brought up a point earlier, which is that The Sovereign Individual was your favorite book because it played to your what you like the most, which was a description of the human condition. Although I'm actually going to be a little bit of an outlier here, which is I like The Great Wave actually a little bit more, in part because it appealed to my data-driven ideas, which is that I like the fact that it analyzed price over time, and it was like the price of goods is the indicator for a lot of the stuff going on.
Yeah,
so, it really truly is important. So I'll give that one to you, Z.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad that you focus on things that I don't focus on, and that I focus on things that you don't. It keeps us very well rounded. You know, it's a nice little yin yang or whatever.
For sure. I'm not trying to discredit the books, but the way that I look at these 3 books is that I think The Sovereign Individual is a bit of a lagging indicator, which is that it's not really going to do a lot of predicting, but it will be very descriptive about past times that have happened. Like it looks further back in history than both of the other books combined. It looks closer towards the birth of Christ, and then it actually talks about like 400-year segments. Granted, it's the indicators that it looks at and the data that it looks at are very much lagging indicators, which is what I'm referring to is that these are things you're really only going to tell once they've passed or come to be. So in this case, it's looking at like the advancements in technology, because no one was anticipating the printing press. The printing press kind of just like showed up one day when Johann Gutenberg like figured it out and then widely distributed it.
Go ahead.
It's the same thing with like food storage in the medieval century. It's like some people figured it out and then they proliferated the idea. It was not something that everyone collectively was like, yep, one day we're going to figure out how to store meat so that it doesn't spoil, or we're going to find some sort of food source that doesn't spoil in wintertime. And then only then will we advance as a society. It's like, I don't know how much you can predict that. But then at the same time, I look at Changing World Order. This one I think it has too many moving parts that have to line up perfectly so that when they do line up, it feels more like happenstance. Because remember, with that theory, you have to have a monetary cycle, an internal cycle, and an external cycle all line up at the same time. And only then will you see the change of the world order or the world reserve currency, per se. So that requires it's very in depth, but at the same time, it's not as predictive. I think it's closer to predictive than a lagging indicator like the sovereign individual. But ultimately, I do think that the Great Wave is the most predictive, and I still use that hesitantly because at the same time, part of the Great Wave idea is that each of the waves has a crest or a peak or a pinnacle that is culminated by some sort of external event, whether it's famine, disease, war, internal strife. It's hard to predict those things, but at the same time, each one of those, it's not something that happens in a singular year. It's usually something that happens as a consecutive result of years. So it's a little more predictive, especially when it comes to analyzing prices, which you can look at the curve and where you are on the curve, whether you're on that flat portion, the slightly up portion, or you're at that point where like you really notice the inflation and you get that K-shaped economy where the poor are doing very poor and the rich are doing very well. So that's where I see a good description of these three books and how their theories match up against each other.
Yeah, so if I'm getting you correct here, it's kind of like the lagging indicator being kind of like the people who were in the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages didn't know that they were in those ages. They just lived daily life, basically. And it's like right now we're calling ourselves, we're in the information age. But 100 years from now, when people look back at where we are right here, right now, are they going to call it the information age? That was the information revolution. So I think that's what you're talking about, correct?
A little bit. But what I'm saying is that I think that if you go off the stuff that the sovereign individual talks about, you're only going to be able to identify it after you've seen like 10 years of data. When you look at changing world order stuff, you're going to be able to see the data pretty accurately, but you're not going to be able to predict anything because you rely. I guess the way I think about it is like, imagine you have different like gears that are rotating at different speeds, and then you only get that one point whenever a perfect marker and a marker like line up perfectly, but they're always coming around what almost feels like randomly. So when they do match up, it feels very rare and unexpected. And then finally, for the Great Wave, it's more of like a building and falling action in a play or a movie or a plot. It's you can feel things building, and then there's only really like one true moment where you really feel that like that was the breaking point. Okay, now we're going down, and the data confirms it. So that's what I'm talking about, like lagging indicators. It's, do I have to have 2 decades of information, or can I recognize things almost instantaneously?
Okay.
I guess
So more useful for like actionable stuff, which
correct.
Yeah, I agree with.
Okay, so the question is then, since you want it to be more actionable or more predictable to be more actionable, what's the actions then?
That is an excellent question, because I would retort back with you is that, are we talking about timescales that are so large that it's even actionable for an individual to accommodate in their entire lifetime?
Okay, so that is a really good one. Here's the thing. Back hundreds of years ago, I would say no. The only thing that you can do is focus on just literally living in your time. However, where we're currently at right now, things have been speeding by so fast that, I mean, just back in the Industrial Revolution, that was maybe what, like 2 generations or 3 generations, and now all of a sudden you can start seeing a change happening, right? So now we're in a place where maybe it's not going to be 2 or 3, maybe it's going to be within 1 generation, like within our lifetimes, right? Or at least our children's lifetime, and they'll be able to see the very easily recognizable effects of, hey, this is what happened to Dad, when I was like 10 years old, and now look at where we are now that I'm hitting 50. I do think that it's going to condense enough, because we are hitting that exponential age where people are going to know, yes, whatever this new age or the changes that have already happened from the industrial to the information age, now we have a new change going on. I think people will be able to identify that.
That's fair. I think specifically in The Sovereign Individual, the author does talk about, and we covered it previously, that the transition between the ages speeds up every time, just because the technology speeds up every time. But sure, I'm not entirely convinced that the duration of each age is getting shorter and shorter. I think it has the ability to extend, but I don't necessarily think it always has to be shorter. Does that make sense?
Could you elaborate on that?
I mean, so what I'm saying is that, so theoretically, the hunter-gatherer society is obviously the longest, just because that is the most amount of human history where we were in that hunter-gatherer society. The agricultural society was next, and that obviously lasted a long time as well. But then we get towards the nation state and the industrial societies. And I know that the industrial society is part of the nation state era, but at the same time, one could be argued that they are different in and of themselves, which is that, so if you look back at 1400s, we have the Renaissance era, which is we have Renaissance leading towards Enlightenment, and then Enlightenment towards the Victorian era. So what I'm alluding to here is like mid 1400s to mid 1600s to late 1800s. So going from mid 1400s to mid 1600s, it's technically shorter than going from mid 1600s to late 1800s. So it might not be statistically significant. It might be like maybe a 5% increase in time. But overall, what I'm saying is that it breaks the trend of the age is always getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah, you got a point on that.
The transitions get faster. I'll agree to the transitions.
Yeah. So it's like Enlightenment into Victorian, right? What was the third one you said there?
Renaissance, Enlightenment, Victorian, modern.
Modern. Okay, yeah.
And I don't think we're at the modern just yet.
Yeah. So now I do kind of see what you're talking about there, because we do consider these like eras, right? My question at that point, I don't want to I don't want to make us go down a rabbit trail or anything, but the question I have is it technological change that does it at that point in time, or is it like some kind of climate change, or do we have microbiotic, or like what's going on with that?
Well, I think each of the different books posits a different idea. For the sovereign individual in particular, what it argues is that it's a combination of the four factors that it lays out, which is, what's the word for map? Topographic? Like
topographics, climate.
Lines on the map, climate, technology, and critical biological. So whether it's like disease or famine, that kind of thing.
Yeah, microbiotic, whatever it's called. Yeah.
So it's either the lines on the map get changed, the climate changes, the food source or the human source changes, or finally technology changes. I can understand the technology, but again, I'm going to go back to the idea that you can't really predict the technology changing or hitting those critical moments of change. Obviously, now in the modern age that we live in, I forget the name of it, but it's the idea that like every 2 years the speed of computer processors doubles or something?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the exponential increase. It's like 0 point or something. Man, I wish I knew the
point of me bringing that up, though, is that kind of idea applies for our time. But there's going to be a point where that theory goes, the curve anyways, goes so vertical that it's almost useless. And there's also a time before it where you were so far below 1 or 0 on the scale, pretty much just like pre-invention, so it didn't matter. Which is that the context of the time we live in is only applicable to the time that we live in. We can't really apply it to the past or the future stuff, because when it comes to some of the technological stuff, there's those key moments where you make that major leap. Whether like it's the whether it's the invention of electricity, the invention of the internet, the invention of Moore's law. Thank you.
Yep.
Or the invention of the printing press, or the invention of long-term food storage. It's all these things where it's like, does it seem like they happen faster? Yes, they do, for sure. It, again, goes to the idea that it took us, 67 years to go from the invention of human flight to the first person landing on the moon?
Yeah.
So it's like we went 10,000 years without being able to fly, and then we went 67 years to the moon. It's like that is a very sharp increase.
Yep.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, so if I'm taking what you say there, right, and I try and kind of like put it into what we're currently looking at, the industrial era, right? Well, the industrial era was probably right around 1860 to 1940s or 1950s, I would say. The reason being for that is after World War II, the nations got together and was like, okay, this is way too much. We're destroying each other. We're going to destroy the world. And so then the nation state era happened, where now all of the nations of the world are no longer just battling. And maybe perhaps the World Wars was actually the beginning of the nation state era, because it was nations fighting each other, right? So a little bit of wiggle room in there, but yeah. And so with nations trying to be at peace with each other, we have from the 1950s, what is it, the beginning of the UN, right? Or what is it, the League of
Nations was, I
It was
want to
the
say
League
it
of
was
Nations,
World
yep.
War One. I
Yep.
don't remember what the World War II one was.
That was the UN, United Nations.
League of Nations to UN.
Yeah. Yep. And so it went from there. That's where it started, the nation state era. That I would say that would go until the invention of the internet, and that's where the information age then starts. And how many years would that be then that we're looking at? Like maybe about like 40 to possibly like 60 as a nation state.
Well, the era of the nation state really began back in the mid to late 1400s, early 1500s. It's where you start to see a lot of the formations, specifically around the Mediterranean. And then I think I'm not going to call it a climax because there's a lot of history that's happened since then, but sure. World War I was a great example of how some of the issues of the nation states come up, which is like, how did you get into this absolute clusterfuck that is World War I? You got there by a series of very small but still rational steps between individual governments and nation states that had alliances, some sort of cooperative agreements, and then ultimately it does culminate with the death of Franz Ferdinand in the early 1900s that kicks off World War I. So it's like that, in my opinion, is one of the culminating points. It's not the end, but it's definitely a point to note, which is the issues of the nation state era really come together and really become visible once you get entangled in a giant, like, multi-continent quagmire that results in the death of like 1 million soldiers. Yeah. That is the start of some of the ultimate failures. Then obviously we get towards World War II, which is partly a aftermath of World War I, thanks to the Treaty of Versailles, and then all the resultant effects of that. And then that ultimately leads into the Cold War, which leads us into the modern era. So.
And now here we are.
And now here we are talking about cryptocurrency on the internet. What a
day. Yeah, man. It's crazy just the sequence of events that things go through. I'm glad I was able to find Moore's Law. I used AI.
That was a good find.
To figure that one out. I said, "Hey, AI, what's the name for like the exponential growth curve of like AI and technology?" And he's like, "Oh, it's called the exponential growth curve. Some people call it Moore's Law." And I was like, "Oh, fuck yeah." Because I've heard that a couple times before.
So, okay, I wonder then, like, how long do you think the information age is going to go on?
Oh, I think
or should we just shelve this and move on?
We'll cover this later on. We'll hit that one for sure, definitely. Until then, though, Will, can you hit us up with our mid-roll chat shoutouts?
Yes, I gotta grab my.
We gotta catch all the people that trickled in while we were waxing poetically about history.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for motherfucking chat shoutouts. You already know. All right. I'm going to presume that you want me to read it since you've gone off camera. First up in chat shoutouts, we've got none other than Tam saying, "What's up, fam?" Oh, look at me. I'm all alone. What's up, fam? Just kidding. I'm not alone. All you at home are with me, spending excellent time and hanging out, having good stuff. What's up, fam? Good to see you, Tam. Welcome to the show. Glad that you could make it. Happy to have you here with us. Next in chat shoutouts, it looks like we've got Hex Monkey. It's wild how much of sovereign individual came true. Not everything, but most. Yes, it is. Like, this is something we were talking about earlier on in the stream. Hex Monkey is just like his use of the words like private key, public key, and just like 15 years before cryptocurrency ever became. I mean, maybe there was some sort of cryptocurrency back then, but like I'm not incredibly well versed. But like, yeah, bro, he had a lot of stuff right over there. So shout out to you, Hex Monkey. Good to see you, broski. Glad that you could be here with us. Hex Monkey is part of the glue that holds the Hex cryptocurrency space all together. And then let's see. All right, that looks like it is it for chat shoutouts, I think. Mrs. Producer.
That's new.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on any of the stuff we were talking about? Because we covered quite a bit there.
Yeah, we really kind of got into a rhythm, I think.
Oh yeah.
My only thought is I'm actually kind of where you're at, Will, where I didn't read The Great Wave, and I still haven't had a chance to look at that one. So trying to compare them is like, okay, no, not going to happen. And then I'm forgetting the title of the other one, but I barely remember it.
Changing World Order by Ray Dalio.
Okay, thank you. The sovereign individual stood out to me a lot more because I found relevant points that I can compare to, like what we're going through literally in today's world. So, yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking.
So that's excellent, and I'm glad that you say that, Cass, because this reinforces something that I heard from, I don't remember if it was Alex Hormozy or if it was some other internet guru, but someone somewhere said it doesn't matter what you say, it matters how you make them feel, right? So like, we read these books that have all sorts of great words inside of them, and it's good information, it's good data. But if you're a person like me or a person like Mrs. McGettit, then if the book doesn't mean anything to you, then it basically doesn't exist. Conversely, if you're a person like Zenith, then it means a lot, and you remember, and it sticks with you, and it's whatever. So like, if you're a person out there and you're authoring a book, or you're talking about an idea, or you're trying to convince somebody to buy your cryptocurrency thing, you have to speak to people on their language. You have to get them on things that they like, on their sticking points, on their preferences. So you got to be like discerning. You have to be able to pick up on little cues and like learn people's love languages, or find out what's the thing that like keeps them interested. I was talking with my brother early about this today, Zenith, about the love languages thing. And it's like, while I think that book is a bunch of bullshit, like in its what's the word, in its application, at its principles, it's useful, because the concept of figuring out what means something to other people, that's good. Now the love language book is like, it's not for me. It does not give reasonable men actionable information. It has you live in a world that is like a girl's word, which is fine. It's for some people, it's not for everybody. But the point is that like, it's important to learn what other people like and present information that you want them. If you want somebody to have information, if I have something inside my head and I want to tell it to you, I can't be calling you a dumbass and saying like, hey, you dingus, you better do this thing, or else like I hate you, and and your puppy's gonna die, and blah 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 blah. You can't, like, you can.
Hey,
you have to
hey!
speak to
You
people
don't
in a way
bring
that
the puppies into this, man. That's
Yeah,
not cool.
no ATF. No ATF.
Sure. Yes, exactly. The ATF doesn't speak to people in their language. They just do nothing but not make friends, right? They just go around killing dogs and kicking in doors. If you want people to be on the same page as you, if you want to win hearts and minds, if you want to get people evangelized into your idea, into your religion, into your monetary system, into your political sphere, you have to get them to listen to the words. And in order for them to listen to the words, they have to want to hear them, either from a positive perspective of they see bright prospects and futures, or from a negative perspective where like it's either FOMO, the fear of missing out, or it's FUD, like I'm going to lose everything. So those are the two things that motivate people to listen to your message. It's either like, this is the end of the world and I better do this or else I won't be saved, or it's like, wow, this is so cool and awesome, I've never seen anything like this before. If you make people just feel nothing but bad, like negative thought, like you turn them off of the message, whatever it is, then the message doesn't stick. And some people aren't going to listen. Some people are just they're gonna be unapproachable or something like that. But
That's true.
the point
Well,
point is that tailor your message. That's what I'm trying to say is, if you want people to listen, you got to tailor your message.
I did want to pop in really quick and just kind of get a little bit of a counterpoint here. I agree with you very much so, but I also want to make the statement that even though these books are not necessarily for me, I am not a person who has ever been good at geography, and I don't enjoy history. Those are neither of those two things are things that I am interested in. Never really have been. I do find it fascinating when it's presented to me in a digestible form. Like Nate watches a lot of history stuff all the time. He's very much into it, especially World War I and II. But I want to say this is in no way meant to be like a negative towards the books that people are choosing. I love them, and what I want to say is I will read them because our circle has decided that that's what we want to do. So another motivating factor is the people around you and the people who you decide to spend your time with, and decide that you want to do the things because that person is interested in this thing and you want to be involved with that and with them, and get the whole party going that way.
I love that you brought that into it, because like that's kind of the price. Like, even if you don't like doing the thing, you like the people, you know? So like, even though you might not enjoy the books and you wouldn't read them on their own merits, like you enjoy what we're doing here as the Degen Roundtable. You enjoy chatting with myself, Zenith, and Nate. And that price, or the price of reading the book, is well below the positivity that you get from having this interaction with us, and us like being here and discussing this stuff and doing the chat shoutouts, interacting with the folks at home. Like, the cost is way lower than the gain. If the cost starts being above like the gain, then you start losing that positive goodwill, like, I enjoy this thing bucket inside of your head, where it's like, oh, this is becoming a draining endeavor instead of an uplifting endeavor. So like, it's incumbent on myself and Zenith and Nate and you to all make this like a positive interaction for everybody, so that way we all enjoy it and we all want to keep doing it and we all keep growing as a result of all like being a part of this. So it's like, there's like tasks for the individual, like serving your own goals. There's tasks for like serving the group goals, and then there's tasks of like, oh well, I don't really want to take out the trash, but if I don't take out the trash, then my family will get the bubonic plague, and I don't like that. So I'd rather take the trash out than have my whole family
that
get the bubonic
escalated
plague
quickly.
Well, I like making bombastic examples because people will remember it.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
True.
I also wanted to say, just real quick, if you're ever interested, Mrs. McGettit, you can take ChatGPT and you could say, rewrite me this book with a Pokemon perspective. Replace all the main characters with Pokemon, or with something that you like. Like, take everything that you like. Like, for instance, if I say, hey, like, I'm not interested in this book, but I have it rewritten from the perspective of like Marine Corps history or something that I happen to like. If I say, hey, replace all the characters and replace all the events with like things having to do with the Marine Corps, but tell me the same general story, then I can trick myself into liking the story more, because it has more of, it's like I'm sugarcoating everything with something that I like, so that way I eat it and get the substance. So that's a trick that you guys can do now that AI is super cheap and everyone has access to basically making free content. You could make things more digestible for yourself.
True. So speaking of getting back to the content, I do want to jump back into the book, and we have one chat that I think is a good segue. It's the last one from Hex Monkey. So Mrs. Producer, if you do not mind, is from Hex Monkey. By the way, shout out to you, brother. He says, it's wild how much of sovereign individual came true. Not everything, but most. And that is exactly what I want to talk about here. So, gentlemen, and our lovely lady producer, I want to get into the point of the point of the book, where the author started to make some of those predictive guesses about the future, specifically the modern age. So I want to turn it over to you guys. What were the things that the author got right? What were the things that he predicted would come true in the modern age that you really caught on to?
Well, I think everybody's going to say the same thing, the whole Bitcoin thing.
That's one of them. That's one of them for sure. So go ahead. Go off on it.
Go off on it?
Yeah. What did he predict?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
What did the author predict when it came to cryptocurrencies?
Oh, yeah, yep. So, enabled to be a sovereign individual, you're going to need ways of transacting around basically the fence that is created, which is fiat, right? And so, because of this, you're going to need ways. You're going to need ways to be able to use cryptographic internet money, basically. And in 1997 they did have the internet back then, so they did know about it, like computers and all that. I don't think they understood just how I think actually they had an idea of like how widespread the internet was actually going to be. And so because they kind of figured that it was going to be so widespread and almost worldly, they thought, okay, well, we're going to need what needs to be next is some kind of currency that is going to be able to be spread through that internet, the digital currency. And the only way to truly have a digital currency is through cryptographics, which was, there's, I think it began early 1920s, 1910s, actually, in World War I, moved into the computers back in the 60s. And that's where technically Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies actually did start, having some experimenting on, but it took them a long time to figure it out.
That's fair. So I'll ask you this question. The author came up with the idea of cryptocurrencies. What do you think were the pressures of the 90s that led them to this realization?
Well, the pressures is the consolidation of, quite frankly, all information. There was only, 3 channels? There's more than 3, but three news stations that everyone is actually going to be watching. There was only, I think it was like you had your local papers, but the majority of the papers all were owned by the same people, and it had the same information coming out. It was very consolidated. And so, yeah, I mean, because of that is completely centralized. And ultimately what they were thinking is for something to go widespread out into the world, that could become decentralized, right?
That's true. I think there's definitely was a pressure during the times of a limited media environment, but at the same time, I think they did see the writing on the wall, which is the idea that even the media environment is going to become dispersed and decentralized. So it's a pretty simple logical step to say, why wouldn't the money supply? Why wouldn't the store of value or the transaction of value also follow suit? Mrs. Producer, did you have something on this one?
Yes. So the question was, why was this a need? Why was this considered something that we needed to basically move into?
Correct. What led them to believe this would be the move?
Gotcha. Okay. So my thoughts on that were, at one point he mentions that when it comes to trying to enforce, this goes back to the taxes thing I was talking about, but to trying to enforce this regulation and imposing taxes on others, and like just that bubble of the control, the government is fighting to get more and more of it. They mentioned that it's not possible when you factor in going overseas. They are not able to do that with countries overseas. So my thought here is that he considers, again, the internet to be kind of a similar vein. It's much, much, much harder to track and control it when you have this big of a networking thing going on, this much to try and control. The internet has gotten, I mean, at that point in time, it wasn't, quite what it is today, but it was getting there and it was starting out. And I think I guess prediction here, you know what I mean, is that he saw that and he said it would be much harder for them to be able to control this, much harder for them to be able to impose their will on it. And we need that. We need some way out of this, because everything that they're doing in this country is only getting worse and worse. And there's got to be some way that the people can break free of that. So that was my thoughts when you brought it up, the question.
I like it. I think I might have a different take than the rest of the panel on this one, but I actually think the cryptocurrency argument is secondary to another argument they talk about, which is that back in the 90s, they predicted the rise of the gig economy, which is that one of the quotes from the book is the idea that your job is no longer going to be a thing that you hold, but it's more going to be a descriptor of the task that you accomplish. And then your payment or your transaction of value is going to be associated with that. So as your job becomes decentralized, you're no longer going to get paid in whatever the currency of the land that your job resides in. But now, because your job resides in cyberspace, you're going to be paid in cyberspace currency. I think right now we're still largely operating on the US dollar as a pseudo cyberspace currency, which is that at the end of the day, a lot of us, like, do we have cash? Yeah. I don't think a lot of us have more than $1,000 in cash at any given moment, but we probably have a lot more of that tied up in net worth, bills, payments, credit card debt. All that is stored not just on a paper physical ledger, but it's stored in ones and zeros. Cryptocurrency is a next step in evolution of that, but we're not quite there yet for transactions and just like everyday occurrences, but we're moving towards that. And I think that the rise of the gig economy and the rise of just e-commerce in general, is an indicator of such. What do you guys think about that? It's kind of a chicken and egg question. Do you think that cryptocurrency comes first, or do you think that cyber jobs come first?
What cyber jobs? What do you mean by that?
I mean,
when you're saying gig economy, I was thinking things like Uber and how people are taking their jobs back into their own hands. But now, then you said cyber work, and I'm like, wait a second, maybe I'm thinking about something else.
That is a fair critique and a good question. So the gig economy, driving Uber, doing DoorDash, all that stuff, definitely a bit of a shift from the corporate 9-to-5 of, updating the database and doing the rounding of pennies, as a shout out to the Office Space gang, but more of a idea of think like Fiverr, or think of remote work, which is that people have the ability to work remotely via the internet. They're able to produce things and information on the internet as opposed to physical goods. I'll cover this later, which is, I think, a fair critique of the book is the idea that I think the author moves too far away from a production base or an industrial base and focuses like squarely on information economy. But the rise of an information economy, in my opinion, does also make sense with rise of a digital currency as well. If you got questions, I see the puzzled looks. If you have questions, hit me.
Real quick before you guys take off with your questions, that makes a lot of sense now. When you describe it that way, it's kind of the idea of work from home. We're going to pay you whatever we pay you. We're going to pay it digitally, which is what we do with cash right now. You can do that as well with the credits and all those other things that they have. And I think you're right, because what you're saying is that the need for this arose from sorry, I am stumbling over my words tonight. But arises from the idea of either we're going to be sending these people paper checks in the mail for the rest of their lives, or we're going to send them something that's much quicker, much easier, and is accessible almost immediately. Who the hell gets paper checks anymore? Like, my brother the other day told me he tried to cash a check and it didn't work. And I'm like, dude, you still get checks? What are you talking about? Like, you know what I mean?
What is this grandpa tech?
Yeah, basically. So anyways, Nate, Will, you guys looked like you had questions. Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember where specifically he said this or where he talked about it in the book. But the way my mind tends to work is like I'll remember kind of like, oh, so this is what he's talking about. And I don't remember necessarily the specific wording that was used in the book. My mind just works that way. So, but he was talking about how the rise of like robots and perhaps something like artificial intelligence can start replacing the workforce, replacing jobs. And so therefore the industrial era will ultimately be kind of wiped out. And instead it's going to allow humans to have way more time to think. And so therefore, because they have a lot of time to think, it becomes the information era where it's no longer about needing to get up and go to work. Now it's all about getting online, getting out into the World Wide Web, and then spreading ideas and services, basically.
Yep.
Take courses, you know.
I agree wholeheartedly that like the day and age of the person that gets up and does a thing like with their own two hands is like it's starting to come to an end, at least in the West. You know, perhaps if you still live in a third world country and you want to be like, you know, cranking out iPhones for Foxconn or something like that at 20 cents an hour, then, you know, perhaps like there's still a place for you to be doing all of the physical blue stuff, the blue collar stuff, I should say. But the day and age of like the factory worker or the industrialist or the person that like does things with their hands is starting to die out and become more so like the common worker, I should say, not like the specialist. So like plumbers are still going to be needed, you know, people that cook food are still going to be needed, like
not necessarily
things of that
though,
nature.
the robots could probably replace that too. And
eventually.
I think that's what he was talking about in the book is like, this is like further into the future though, you know, when it's like, oh, well, now the robots are replacing all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
What's going to be needed, right? And so you go from the the gig economy to the attention economy to basically almost like a thought economy, you know?
Yeah. Which is kind of like a little bit of what we're doing here at the Degen Roundtable. It's like we're not doing this and we're not making like boatloads of money, but we're still existing in the like the thought world and the thinking about stuff and the and all of that like similar realm is we're playing like the talking game. And of course, like there's going to be a whole lot more, like there's a lot larger of a, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like momentum for starting, and like it's a lot more competitive and as far as the money making goes. But this is what more people are doing. More people are being entertainers, more people are streaming, more people are doing, you know, more people are creating like YouTube tutorials and like, you know, YouTube University on, hey, I sell houses, this is how I go on xyz.com and then flip a house for, you know, $20 or $1,000 a pop or something.
Yeah, courses, you know, something like that. I think that's a great example of what the futuristic economies are basically going to be like. Another interesting thing, and tell me if I'm going off in the weeds here, but is how the governments, right, are going to structure it. It's no longer going to be these centralized entities, but instead like little pockets of basically little governments. And the idea with the economy there is that they sell things to each other that, you know, other ones are good at, right? And it's no longer going to be tax based.
I think it's still going to be tax-based, and I think the author talks about it, but I think it's a blend of what you just said and what Will was alluding to, which is that Will was alluding to competitive advantage, which is whatever field you're in, there is a theoretical and mathematical competitive advantage to the space you're operating in. And what the author talks about when it comes to the nation states, especially with citizenship, is the idea that nation states are going to have to compete with each other when it comes to tax advantage and tax policy. Which is that when you have the ability to operate theoretically anywhere in cyberspace, or also theoretically nowhere in cyberspace, when it relates to a geographical position, it means that if you want to claim a nationality, really the only reason to claim a nationality is because it offers you the best benefits or the least amount of taxes. So that's where the author really posits the idea of like where the nation state is going and how that interacts with people, which is, I think that this book actually has a very libertarian bent to it, or a very free market bent to it, because it actually applies the free market mentality to governments themselves, which is that your citizenship really isn't offering you any physical benefits. In fact, it's actually offering you lower restrictions than other ones, which is the book doesn't think about what nation states have to offer you from like a welfare or a benefits perspective, but it offers you benefits from we are going to tax you the least perspective, which is that you need to go where you are treated the best, where your money is taxed the least, and you have the most opportunity to operate independently. And I think that's what the book really posits here, is the idea that the nation states are going to transition to that kind of a model where they get very competitive with each other, not in like a war category, but in like a market competition.
Yeah, where their citizens are customers rather than subjects.
Bingo. There you go. You nailed it. Customers. Yep.
I really liked that part of the book where he described like how the different government ideas of like there was the customer class, there was I can't remember any of the other ones, but the one that stuck out to me the most was like when he described the people that operated under, I think it was the Italians in the mid 16th century or something like that, where they were basically like they bought protection and they got the best cost benefit, they had the best results. They didn't necessarily have like the craziest, because they then compared it to like the governments that win wars, which are the ones that like seize control of everything, like I think they were talking, the example they gave was Poland, how Poland was like, it was a pretty decent place to live. And then, they have borders with Russia, and Russia implemented socialism. And so they just swept through and took over everything because they had of like a crazy militaristic power, because it wasn't all serving self-interest. It was all serving the interest of the machine at large. So like when you have a government that serves the customers, then you don't necessarily have a government with the best military that just wipes out all the competition. So there's something to be said for that, like being factored into the consideration as well. Not that I have any ability to change what my government does, but it's something to think about.
That's true. So I do want to cap off this segment with two final points. Number one is a prediction that I think was half correct, and a prediction that has largely not come to fruition yet. The first one is the book spends a lot of time talking about telemedicine. Or in fact, one of the things that really stood out to me was the idea of like telesurgery even, which is that because you have the ability to be decentralized or globalized through the web, you could theoretically go hire the best doctor in the world to operate on you physically by them operating through some sort of like control mechanism via the internet. Because whatever skill or knowledge they possess is able to be transmitted through that. I think personally there are some restrictions on this, but I think that this prediction has largely come to fruition outside of people remotely operating on you from a surgery perspective. But in particular, I think specifically during the time of the virus, or the coof, if you will, telemedicine definitely became a thing. Because up until that point, it was very heavily restricted to be an in-person activity. But during that time, when you physically could not go out and meet with people, the idea of telemedicine was definitely opened up more, and you could meet virtually with doctors, talk about things, get prescribed things over the phone even. And that's really where I saw that kind of come to fruition. Obviously, still not doing robot surgery yet, but I think telemedicine is definitely becoming more of a thing. And I thought the book spent a good amount of time on that. What do you guys think?
I've used telemedicine myself, and it's a fantastic, cool new thing to be able to just like go on a Zoom call and just get prescription drugs. And it's like, man, I wish, like, part of me, my sovereign individual part, and I'm going to go on a little tangent here. My sovereign individual part wants me to just like be able to like, I just want to be able to go to CVS and like buy morphine, buy cocaine, buy like
that is not the tangent I thought it was going to be, but okay.
I'm picking the most bombastic
yeah,
ones
that
so
went in a
remember,
different direction,
right? If I said I want to just go there and buy like straight up, pharmacy grade acetaminophen or something, right? Super like whatever, or like buy whatever drug, like I have to like jump through hoops to get some sort of products that I want, because we have all these crazy laws in the United States that stop us from buying things that would hurt us, or this, that, or the other thing. And like you have to go get a permission slip from daddy doctor in order to put some stuff into your body to solve your problems. So like I'm not terribly fond of that perspective, because it doesn't suit my desire for sovereignty and whatnot. It's like if I were to go buy steroids, then if somebody has steroids and they want to sell them to me, like excellent, like why should I have to like go and get a permission slip from somebody
Okay.
to get
Well,
some stuff?
I'm going to counter you a little bit on that one. There's a very good reason for that, and it is because a lot of people are very stupid.
Sure.
You give them free access to the shit, and not only do they hurt themselves,
not free.
but they're no. Free
There's
access, as in you can free access as in anybody can walk into any store, and so long as they have the money to get it, they can grab it and go. You give people that kind of access, not only are they most likely going to hurt themselves, but they're probably going to hurt others, which is not something that we want.
You can make the same argument for cars. You can make the same argument for guns. Like the point that I'm making, it's not so much about like I understand that there is a definitive risk, and we give people the opportunity to drive by taking a test. And I still think that that's a bunch of bullshit too. Like if I had my druthers, there would be no licenses for the roads. It'd just be like, yeah, if you want to drive, go drive. And if you like do some dumb shit, you get pulled over. But like I would say that yes, there's going to be people that do dumb things. Yes, there's going to be people that hurt other people, for sure. You'll get that in anything in the world. Like you have that with hammers, you have that with circular saws, you have that with anything. I'm focused more on the principle of sovereignty and ability, more so than like the fact that some people could hurt some people. Because like if some people are stupid and they're driving on the road all the time, and I guarantee you there's way more people getting in car accidents than there are people like that would be poisoning others or something like that. The point is like it's not so much about the tool, in my opinion. It's about the ability, and the ability is the thing that I would focus on. And like you are correct. There are a lot of people that would hurt themselves, and I feel for them, and that's terrible and it's horrible. But I don't think it's someone else's job to tell me what I can and can't do when it comes to my ability to solve my own problems and do things of that nature. Like you're 100% right. There are people that would do bad things, and like that is the world that we live in. And so like by deciding to occupy space on this patch of soil that is America, I am tacitly, implicitly, explicitly giving my seal of approval to the United States for making these rules and me like living in them and abiding by them and stuff. But like I still don't enjoy it, and this is me voicing my non-enjoyment for it. And I would totally love to have the ability to go and get these dangerous tools. Like I can go and buy a circular saw. Nobody's going to stop me. Circular saws are very dangerous. Lots of people chop their fingers off.
Table saws, my dude.
Table saws. Like the fucking the shit that they put in our food. Red dye number 5. Like I could go on that there's a whole bunch of stuff that's terrible that exists that we already have access to.
And I agree with that.
I'm saying I would just like one more.
Just one more.
Take it away. Take it away.
What I was just saying, no, I get what you're saying, and I agree with you. And the good fortune that you have is you are not a stupid person. You are a smart human. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are not. So while I get what you're saying, and I do agree with you to a certain degree, the reason there are a lot more deaths caused by these things that are much easier to get your hands on is because they're much easier to get your hands on. Sure. If you give a hobo access to smallpox, how many people do you think he's going to kill?
Ooh, that's a good point.
So that's all I'm saying is I get where you're coming from, but at the same time, I think that's just a little bit too risky to be like anybody can just walk into a store and buy meth if they feel like it.
Yeah, sure.
But no, I totally get where you're coming from though.
Yeah, and it's like that is a reasonable concern, and that makes sense. I think that like we do agree that we each have different preferences, and perhaps it's because I have more testosterone that I'm willing to, fight the hobos who's trying to infect me with smallpox or like, something. And
you're gonna punch the smallpox out of him.
I'm gonna punch the smallpox. I'm gonna fucking just.
I'm gonna beat the smallpox out of you.
Yeah, exactly. Or I just won't be next to homeless people or something like that. Like it is incumbent on people to learn the things that they're using. Like if you buy a circular saw or a table saw and you don't read the instructions about like, hey, turn it off before you touch it with your fingers, then like there's gonna be problems and there's gonna be people that hurt themselves. I think that I'm the person to decide if I'm the one that gets to make the decision as opposed to somebody else. I don't like outsourcing my decision making to doctors, to governments, to anyone else. That's my own personal preference.
Gotcha. And I want to throw in, kind of at the end of here to wrap up the point that I'm thinking about right now. What he says in the book, this kind of all goes back to that, is the taxes that we pay is the price that we pay for the government's protection. They are trying to protect people, so-called, supposedly, anyways, by not giving them access to these things. So that's something that they mentioned in the book, and I just wanted to throw that in there because I think it kind of wraps up the whole idea that I've been thinking about pretty nicely.
Fair enough. Tell you what, let's move to the final prediction. This is the one that I think didn't come true, and this is the metaverse. The book talks about the metaverse as a virtual world where you're going to spend the most of your time. You can be anything you want. You can look however you want. You can transact most of the ways you want. However, the one real thing that is going to be a restriction is cryptocurrency, or the digital currency in this regards. In my personal opinion, this is the one prediction that has not either come to fruition yet or has been kind of rejected by the society or technology at large. It could be that like we just haven't found our way out of the uncanny valley yet. But in one sense, I'll agree with the author in the idea that we do spend a large amount of our time online. As of right now, like the four of us are literally producing a show for the audience that is also virtual. However, at the same time, though, I am still broadcasting my real face and my real voice through like maybe a little bit of equalizers and whatnot. But at the same time, it's not the full-fledged idea in the book, where I think the author is closer to like the Fahrenheit 451 version of metaverse, which is like you have an entire room in your house where like all four walls are a screen that is interactable, like visual programming, and it's almost controlled by AI, which is like you can kind of imagine yourself closer to like holding a part in a play, and then whatever the program that you are inside of is going to react to you, as opposed to whatever it is now, which is like people put things out on the internet and then other people respond in kind through whatever medium it is, whether it's YouTube likes, Twitter retweets, whatever you do on Rumble or the new Blue Sky thing or whatever. I think there's like some inklings of the metaverse that came true, but I think the author kind of overstated the metaverse in their version as opposed to what we have now. What do you guys think?
I don't remember the statement that he made on the metaverse, so I'm gonna sit this one out, I guess.
Yeah, that seems a little very far into the future. Also, the direction that I go with that is the idea that maybe this life that we're currently in is nothing more than a video game for beings that have and we are the metaverse, right? For beings that are literally just like, hey, we figured everything out in our universe, and so let's see if we can happen to start off a new life and see if we can advance in some sort of, or become enlightened, right? Through the game of life. But yeah, I guess I'm not quite. I don't really know the direction that this one's heading.
Our metaverse. Go for it, please. Take it away.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. I remember one part of the book that was talking about. It was something along the vein of that when this technology does start becoming more and more prevalent, the popular people, the popular parties that are, most well known around the world will shift. Instead of having our pop stars and our rock stars and our government and all these people who are all over billboards and news channels and whatever else be the most prominent and well known things. And they have to look a certain way because of this, because popularity is gained off of what we see and what we like to see. The internet will kind of eliminate that a little bit, because anybody can be sitting behind the computer and they can be short, tall, fat, homely, beautiful, ugly, whatever. And a lot of those factors will no longer be in play because we'll have the internet to be behind. And I think that, I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were talking about, but I know that was at least like I think a part of the metaverse that he's kind of talking about that we're moving towards. I definitely think at least that is becoming true. There's a lot of technology out there where you can literally change everything. Like there's filters and those programs where you can turn yourself into like a little anime character, and you're just you're just on the screen,
baby.
You're just on the screen as that. So I'm not sure if I'm on the right path here. I'm not remembering everything he said, but I do remember that little bit, and I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, as I think that part at least is showing itself to be very very true at this point in time, and it's only becoming more and more of a thing as time goes on.
I agree with you, but I also slightly disagree. I think that you are correct, especially when it comes to like, I know I just said it like half jokingly, but the VTuber effect, which is we've physically gotten to the point where you can put like tracking balls on your face and appear as an entirely different profile or image of yourself. Yeah. I think the part that I'm going to slightly disagree on is the book talks about what is effectively live events in cyberspace. So for everybody that's been to a concert in real life, that is a very different feeling than attending a like metaverse concert, which is like, I guess it's closer to imagine like VR chat, but like there's an actual performance going on, but it's still being broadcast directly into your earphones. It's not physically the same. And I think the reason that it is that you lack the tactile or the physical like touch and feel, and like whether you're at an outside venue and I can like feel the cold air on my face and all the weird sweaty people rubbing against me, and then I can like physically feel the sound that is so loud that it like I can like feel it resonating in my bones. It's that kind of stuff. So there I don't know if I'm trying to make a too direct one-to-one correlation between IRL to metaverse, but in my personal opinion, based on what the author was describing in the book with like live events and appearing how you want and being whoever you want, I just don't think that transition or that one-to-one comparison has been made. I think that one-to-one comparison has been made in a lot of other different categories, whether it is like the gig economy, the cryptocurrency stuff, nation states fighting with individuals for effectively similar political and real-world power. But in my opinion, I still think that this is the one that has not come to fruition yet, and I partly think it's either due to a lack of societal desire for it or just the technology isn't there.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on that one. Basically, what that dumbs down to is that we have not found a way to virtually be able to stimulate all of our senses. There are still some that are being left out.
Bingo.
But I think
you mean the
it's
4D,
a matter of time.
The 4D movie theater of the Rugrats movie with the scratch and sniff stickers wasn't the experience?
No, we're not quite there.
Wait, they did that?
That was a thing. Oh gosh, how old was that? That was like early 2000s.
I think I vaguely remember
They
that.
claimed it was a 4D experience.
Yeah, I've been to something like
3D
that.
through time.
It wasn't that, but it was like a documentary thing with bees, and I remember they physically had like a thing in the chair that like poked you, like you got stung by a bee, and then they had like smells that would waft through somehow. I don't know how they did the smell thing, but I remember doing something like that now that you mention it.
Think about those video games where you drive a car and it like puts you in the big fucking simulator thing, and you're like,
sim racing,
shaking you around, or like the stuff that pilots do, where to simulate the gravity, they tilt up, tilt down, left, right, whatever. Like we're not there yet, but like we're on the way.
That's true. Cass, the example of the bee documentary you gave me a good chuckle, because I was like, I imagine, yes, I paid for a movie ticket and I got stabbed as a bonus.
Yep.
There you go. That's a great bonus.
It's like just thinking of like Jerry Seinfeld in the Bee movie. It's just like I'm picturing Jerry coming down and just fucking like stabbing people. I just watched a different movie, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Highly recommend it. It's super great.
I just saw that, like, as in reference to something today. I can't remember where, but I just saw that one again.
It's such a good movie, man.
So,
man, I enjoyed it.
To your question, then, are we trying to go the direction of, like, when we do get to that point, what is society going to look like? Is that kind of the direction where we're going?
Maybe, but I think that's a decent segue to the critiques, which is, do you think that society has been moving in that direction, or do you think it's been moving in a different direction?
Yeah. I don't think human beings are going to go that direction. The reason being is because what are we? Just like, you have to imagine yourself in an entire society and everyone that you know, you don't really see each other in real life anymore. Instead, you are basically in a single place where you interact with the world with something else. And the only thing that will stay the same, stay human, stay you, would be the feelings that you get off of the sensors, you know? But for who you're talking to, that's not the real person. And so everything becomes fake at that point. And you could literally say, hey, this is just a really advanced video game.
That's fair. I mean, not to get like too black-pilled with it, but the four of us were literally all in the same location very recently. But it took significantly more time, energy, money, and attention to get all of us physically together in New York, as opposed to like us hopping onto a Friday night stream.
Yeah.
Like that's, it's a weird thing to think about.
Is it because there's such a heavy cost, it's worth more, you know? Like,
agree.
I'd like it because we've sacrificed so much value to get there. It's worth so much more. Like these streams are awesome, don't get me wrong, but they're not worth anywhere near as much as doing stuff in real life. And I'll say, just like my own anecdotal experience, I've been up here in New Hampshire, fucking living in the fucking mountains away from everybody. And my only interaction with human beings is when I go to the store to get more like food and stuff, or when I hop on stream with you guys, or I'm on the phone with my brother, or on like playing video games with my friend, or like I'm doing cold calls to help my to like help Sam with his business and stuff. And so like this headset and this camera and like my phone and my internet, that is my connection to the real world, other than like when I literally go walk, half a mile to go to the store and get like my daily exercise or whatever. It's like, that's my human connection. So like it's I think we're already in that world where we hang out online more so than we hang out in real life. And it does lack a certain like essence or joie de vivre or something, right? It doesn't have the same like meaning as real life interaction. That's why I love like, my little thing right here, bit.ly/hex_meetup. It's because it's about meeting people in real life. And it's like, that's something that I think all of us are, I don't know if starved for, but it's like, it's something that I enjoy. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And so I created a thing that helps me get what I want, which is this thing, and other people like it too. So, even better. But like we're already in that world is my response.
So are you making the argument that the author's version of the metaverse is closer to what we're doing now, as opposed to our idea of the metaverse, which is like 3D goggles, haptic feedback suit, like fully immersed?
I mean, it might be coming, when that stuff gets cheaper, then, hey, I could totally see that being the new way.
I guess, but would the guy that wrote this book in 1997 look at what we're doing right now, and would he call this the metaverse?
Probably, yeah. I would imagine so. He was right about us carrying our phones around in our pockets. He was dead right about that, and our phones being a computer.
Yeah, that's what you got.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, in regards to your question asking whether or not we're moving closer or further away from the so-called metaverse world, I actually think that we are resisting it at this point in time. And I think the reason for that is actually because of the media that we've been exposed to. Movies like, I'm trying to think of the one where they have, no.
I think she'd remember that one.
Oh, Ready Player One.
Yeah, neither of those. It's the movie where they put everybody in those machines and they have them all hooked up and they're all just, nothing they do is actually real. It is
Ready
the
Player
Matrix.
One.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah. And made Ready Player One is pretty damn close too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Matrix is
Good
the red
suggestion,
pill,
Nate.
blue
Yeah.
pill, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Correct.
Yes, that's the one then. I'm sorry. I actually have never seen it. We have
It's good.
like all of them except for the first one. So we got to go get the first one and then just have a marathon. We haven't seen them, or I haven't seen them yet.
They're
I've seen
pretty
bits
good.
and pieces, of course.
Yeah.
But
I
no,
still think the original
think-
Matrix is it holds up
That's the-
to the plot, the pacing, the characterization. I think it still holds up to today's standards, if not
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
exceeds
absolutely.
the trash that we've seen lately.
Yeah, I definitely
Hardcore.
want to see it. It's just something that we keep forgetting to get. You know, one of those things that's like, oh, I got to go buy this movie, and then you just never do it. Like 5 years later, you're like, oh yeah, I should have bought that movie.
Oh, one of these
Um,
days.
But no, what I was saying is, I think, to the point of your question, I don't think we're in the world that he's expecting yet, and I think we are resisting it as a general populace because of things like the Matrix, the ideals like that. It's a complete robbery of free will at that point, and people are resisting that pretty hard. They don't want to turn into that. They don't want the world to become this dystopian thing. If it wasn't for media like that and kind of not only the media, but those ideas in general existing, and that kind of propaganda and all of those thought processes that go with these things, I think we would be a lot closer to what you're talking about, because we're starting to get into that technology. We do have it. It's
Okay.
just not widespread.
That's fair. Tell you what, you're talking about the resistance, so let's go ahead and finish up with the resistance of this theoretical movement. So towards the end of the book, the author talks about the idea of the neo-Luddites, or the populace that resists the information age, and then also in conjunction, the reaction of nation states to resist the change to the nation age. So in your guys' opinion, what do you see as some very realistic pushback to the idea of shifting towards the informational age?
Touching
Sorry about
grass.
that. I was clicking the wrong thing. So are you talking about like individuals, or are you talking about like centralized entities?
Both. Hit me with either.
Jesus. Well, I mean, Trump alone, just look at what the hell happened this whole election cycle, right? The last 3 election cycles, that was all centralized entities trying to brainwash individuals, saying,
Yep.
no, you don't want to be free. You don't want
Yeah.
that, right? The whole thing of crypto itself, right, is individuals saying, well, I mean, actually, how about this one? Let's go with this one. This is a fun one. So we have a whole lot of cryptos that are being created right now that are just VC funded, right? And they're supposed to do all these special things, and they have tons of utility and all that. But they start off the prices extremely high because everybody else was paid first, right? And then it's like, okay, by the way, here's literally 6% of the entire the entire token supply, and okay, now you, the market, can decide. And everyone's like, well, screw that. I'm just gonna go make a meme over here, and
Yep.
all us individuals who can get into that meme coin that is completely decentralized because it's literally just made by us, right? The community. We're going to go that direction instead. And so the centralized entities who are sitting there trying to actually create something useful, but then pay everybody else first to do that, and then gives it to the small individual, right? Instead of that, they're not getting anything. Instead, all those little individuals, the sovereign individuals, those ones go create their own meme coin and then gather together and say, hey, I like this too, and then they buy that up.
That's fair. I think you started with a point that I did want to cover real quick, though, which is the idea of specifically what we've seen in the United States over the last 12 years, which is, this is a bit of a personal opinion, but I think the Trump elections have been an example of populism versus centralization, which is that I think the current government has been an extension of everything we've seen in the last 100 years, especially with the rise of the nation state, which is that the power of each government has only grown more and more, and what they're involved in, their responsibilities, their funding, their scope and its reach has only grown. And what we've seen with a lot of the sentiment in the Trump campaigns in either 2016, 2020, or 2024 is definitely been a pushback on that centralized ideology, or what a lot of other people have called the Leviathan, the deep state, the blob, the swamp, whatever you want to say. It's the idea that modern bureaucracy has grown so large that it is an entity that requires pushback. And I think one way that the book kind of got the prediction wrong was that the book talks about how when you move towards the information age, governments are going to get leaner on their own and they're going to compete with each other more on their own prerogative. But what I think we've seen in the last 20 years has actually been the opposite of that, which is that it's been the expansion of the nation state age, which is that the governments have only tried to grow more and more expansive and stronger, whether it's early Bush doctrine with nation building and spreading democracy across the globe, or whether it's a more populist idea on the opposite side of Trump, which is like democratic socialism, the expansion of the nanny state or welfare state, whatever you want to call it. It's the idea that instead of governments getting leaner and competing more and allowing the private sector to take over certain of those jobs, it's actually been the opposite, which is that the government or people have been pushing for the government to take over more jobs. That's one of the real criticisms I'll give to this book, which is the idea of like whether or not we're actually seeing that transition to what they describe as the information age, where we get that more competitive process. It's the free market of governments competing with each other for citizens as customers, as opposed to what I think we've been seeing, which is the expansion of a tax base in support of whatever policy or directive they're trying to accomplish.
I think it's transitionary.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, okay, so from what you're talking about, right? Basically, the idea here is that the people are starting to push back on these centralized entities, and so these centralized entities are now basically putting their boot down harder, right? And
I think that's especially apparent with stuff like in the cryptocurrency space, like Operation Checkpoint, Gary Gensler's leadership under the SEC, just trying to stifle this stuff. But yeah, exactly. I think you're on the right point here.
Exactly. And so from there, you know, the tighter you grip a wet soap bar, the faster it's going to slip out, right? And so ultimately,
that's a good analogy.
Well, you're not going to give the Star Wars reference here, which is the tighter you grip the galaxy, the more star systems slip through your fingers.
Well, I've never heard that one actually before.
That's an episode 4 reference, baby.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's why I don't remember it.
We old up in here. My knees creak.
Oh no, episode 4 was the new. Oh my god. But yes. To finish off, so because they're trying to maintain control so much and just tamping everybody down, more people are trying to escape, and the more people that try to escape, the more that newer technologies get created, cryptos, right? That the people with those newer technologies then gain power, gain monetary value, right? Because of like these cycles always go. You know, big central entities start tamping down too hard. New technology comes out, right? Because everybody is trying to get out. You know, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And from there, that's when people are going to start creating their own little bubble states, right? Little bubble governments within a government, or even like perhaps they go to smaller governments, like smaller areas, smaller governments, and then start taking over that one, Argentina. And from there, those ones slowly grow until all of a sudden there's enough people escaping and running away from the larger entities that they realize we have lost control entirely. It's a free fall. But all of these, what was smaller governments who are now competing for the taxes and taxes, basically whoever treats you better. Excuse me on that one. But yeah, whoever treats the citizens better now have all escaped over there. So now they're all living over there. And then those ones, because there's more people, obviously, they get bigger, more powerful, until finally you have almost a leveling off point. And once you hit that leveling off point, what happens from there? I don't know. Usually that becomes kinetic, you know, and we don't want that. I think instead it's going to be cyber warfare, which has mainly to do with attention, I would say. At least that's what I've seen so far.
Yeah. That's well put, bro. I like that. That's a good thesis.
That's fair. I guess the final point that I don't think we've touched yet is, so we've talked about nation state reactions and how they're going to try to either impose like exit taxes and whatever, or actually try to compete on the attention economy like you're talking about, or restrict people to do so. The last one I want to talk about is, what do you think the populace, and how is the populace going to react to the information age? Because the way that the book describes it is that there's 3 classes, and they're either winners or losers outright in their own regard. So the new winners in the informational age are going to be the people that are able to drive creativity, productivity, or whatever the new transaction of the information age is. Then there's going to be the lower class of the old age, which are just going to be unable to compete with the new informational age and transact in that way. But then that third group is actually the middle group that I think we've seen a lot of pushback, or they've broken off and adopted new technologies. And that's the people that are very much entrenched and are like the middle, which are going to be replaced by things like AI. I don't think the author explicitly calls out AI by name in this book, but he talks about how automation and productivity and mechanization or robotics are theoretically going to replace a lot of jobs that are done by humans as of now. I think that the real world example of this was the dock workers strike back in early October, I want to say.
It was not long ago, yeah.
It was not. But the dock workers were specifically not just striking over a government contract, but they were striking with regards to pushback on automation and AI technology. And that's the exact group that I think the author is calling out in the middle ground here, which is that they're people that are almost at that cusp, but they're like the mid to high level of the old economic order, and moving to the new economic order would mean that they get bumped down a rung or they get bumped down to obsolescence. So what do you guys think about that description of the three different groups?
Yeah, okay, so here's the way that I see it. So the three groups stay the same at all times. However, this middle group, a small amount of them adopt new technologies and get bumped up into the upper group. The rest of them get pushed down. In the center is the bots, okay? But here's the difference. The bots will create so much economic power or economic energy, and you really don't have to pay them things, right? You don't have to put economic energy into them. The ones up here on the third or the highest point puts the economic energy down there to build out the robots. The robots then create the products and everything that is needed for a living and all that, right? And then distribute it down into the lower level. So that way, people may not be happy that, well, I'm poor as all hell, right? But people will be satisfied enough with something like a universal basic income. And the only reason that we can pay for a universal basic income is not because of the classical, like, oh, we got to tax the hell out of people, but it's because these robots have made things so efficient that energy, that economic energy that would have gone into all of those middle class people, then gets shifted downwards.
Okay, interesting. So you talked about how we'll call it the middle class for lack of a better term, but the middle class of workers or socioeconomic ladder in the current age, as it moves to the modern age, it's going to split. When you say it splits, do you mean that we're going to continue to have three striated classes, or do you think it's going to turn into two classes? It's going to be like upper, middle, low, or just like haves and have-nots?
Well said. So yeah, I think it's haves, have-nots, but the difference is the way it used to be is have-nots is always the have-nots have to do all the have to put in all their energy, their life energy into giving to the haves, right? And then the haves just enjoy the prosperity of that. Whereas in this case, the haves and have-nots are going to be the have-nots are going to be provided for by the efficiency of robots that don't care about that. And then, and then in the particular case of the haves are going to have the ability to then continue to innovate and pour that money into more robots that they'll basically kind of be cycling, because rich people will buy more bots to make themselves more money, and then so you kind of see how that goes, and then all the extra economic energy will actually get distributed downward. Now, does that mean that?
So if you're proposing only two tiers, that means that there should be a key delineation between them. So what do you think that delineation or that line that separates them are going to be?
I think the separation is who is going to be controlling the technology. And
so it's control of technology?
Okay, so it's going to be control of technology. It's going to be abundance of, I don't want to say education. I think that's incorrect, because I think everybody will have the ability to have free education, but those who are able to use it, those who are able to learn and then go and build something new or innovate on something or have ideas out there. That's what I mean by education. Okay. So it's a new type of education. So it's going to be the people who can command the energy, people who can command the education, and then people who can command the art. So the arts, fill in the blank what art it might be, but the creativity of people. And this, I think we had a book club a couple of weeks ago where I introduced this idea of in the future, the new economies are going to be all about creativity, because everyone's going to be taken care of, and everyone's going to be able to just sit down and basically just be able to think. Okay, putting that idea out there, what is there for people to do? Creativity. They start creating things, they start learning more about things, and then they start building things.
Okay. One of the things that you described in that argument about specifically doing things around the education idea, it's that I think the author of the book specifically talks about how that middle class of the old era is partly that because they're not exactly like innovators or new creative thinkers, but they've become proficient to the level that they also have attained a certification by some governing body that creates a level of scarcity or restriction. And that when we transition to the information age, like what you're talking about, it's like holding the certification, or like you could almost imagine it as like the liquor license of a bar. It doesn't matter that you have a liquor license anymore. It's that things are going to get so decentralized. It's more of just about like who's serving beer. So in regards to this, it's less of like, do you hold the governmentally accredited certification? People aren't going to care about that. They're just going to care about like, are you providing me the thing that I care about? Is the service or good that you're providing me actually meeting my needs and my desire and my expectations? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's the idea of, do you have a bachelor's degree or can you do the job?
There you go. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep. Sure. Yeah, and that right there is the educational part that I was talking about. That's gonna. Yeah, that one's, it's really difficult to explain that though, because as soon as you say education, it's like, well, you have a bunch of idiots down here and then a bunch of smart. It's really hard to explain that properly.
No, I think you're entirely right. Education, especially in today's day and age, it's almost got like two meanings. It's one meaning is, do you physically know how to do the thing? And the second meaning is, did you attend the accredited university or course and receive acknowledgement that you have appeased as much, passed a certain test, and kissed the ring as a result of it? It's that idea. It's like, do you physically know how to change the oil, or are you certified by some body elsewhere to change oil? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to give a final window of critique for the book here, which is, I want to ask you guys, is there anything that you think the author oversold or did not acknowledge?
Yes.
What do you got?
Y2K. I want to hear, I already kind of talked about it though, so I think
you think he oversold Y2K?
I beat that horse pretty good in the beginning, I think.
Okay.
But that's my 2 cents. What about you? Did you have something you wanted to say?
I want to kick it to the rest of the panel first, but I do have something.
Okay.
Personally, nothing that really springs to mind. I know that if I go back and read it though again or listen to it, I'll be like, oh no. But that's just one of those things.
What are you thinking?
Fair enough. Mrs. Producer, do you have anything that you think the author oversold or overlooked?
Mine was also going to be Y2K. He went into that pretty heavily.
Yeah, he was very obsessed with it. I mean, it was a very prominent problem in the
back then it was
97s, but it does not hold up to the test of time. Which
you got a point there. That Y2K was literally 2000 and it was written in 1990. So this book is so advanced, I keep forgetting it was written in 1997.
Yeah, dude, isn't that something?
It's both very advanced, but at the same time, I think with regards to the Y2K problem, it also dates itself very heavily with certain aspects like that.
Oh yeah.
All right, fine. I'll round the corner here and I'll say that I think personally the book oversells the informational age with regards to the information economy. I think the author kind of overlooks the idea that, I think he makes an assumption too far, which is that you have to have some sort of a production base for a nation to exist at all. And what I mean by that is you have to have the ability to interface with technology, whether it's a computer, a keyboard, a mouse, or you have to literally keep yourself alive, which is you have to have shelter, you have to have food, and you have to have energy. I think the author does not take these things into consideration and kind of makes the assumption that like, oh yeah, whatever, AI and robots, they'll figure it out, whatever, sludge in a tube into your appendage somewhere, whatever. It's like, no. I think you're understating the importance of those three things, because I go back to the Great Wave. I think the existence of the price of those three goods dictate a lot of how a society operates. And I fully understand the technology piece and the idea of sovereignty moving into the future of the individuals competing with the nation states. But at the same time, you're not going to be able to compete with the nation state if you literally cannot feed yourself and you cannot house yourself and you cannot access the technology itself. I think that in particular, over the last 20 years, we've seen censorship was greatly on the rise, whether it was the creation of the Patriot Act, or whether it's been the censorship that has not been governmentally focused or centralized, but through social media, through access to certain things, whether it's like debanking of the people that were involved in the Canadian trucker protest. It's stuff like that. I think the author is very correct when he made a lot of the predictions about cryptocurrency, about the information age, about telemedicine, but I think he does oversell it when he regards an entirely information economy. You can have the information economy, but there has to be something that underpins it. Because if you don't have humans, you don't have the information economy, because no one is consuming the information. At that point, you get to computers talking to each other, at which point they don't have physical needs, so they don't need to provide for that. But at the same time, if they don't have physical needs, it means they don't have people upkeeping it. And if people don't upkeep it, then it means that the whole system's going to collapse. But at the same time, to take it a step below, which is that if the information economy doesn't feed people, you're not going to have the economy at all.
100%.
So yeah. I think the production base is a little undersold in the information economy. And the reason being is I think it's very easy if you're at the bleeding edge of technology, you kind of see your worldview around that. So because the author was in that idea at the time, it's very easy to believe that the rest of the world is just going to get brought up to that level. But you're ignoring all the things that put the world at that level in the first place, whether it's the amount of food it takes to keep the population, whether it's the population itself that has to maintain that level of size and scale to allow the information to flow, or whether it's the landmass, it's the food, it's the climate, it's the whatever. It's all the things that keep life going and keep humans on the planet that are able to drive the information economy. That's the part of the book that really, really was missing for me.
So when you're talking about production level, it's literally humans are still going to have to do things with their two hands. And here, and I will give you a solution. It is so as any creature evolves and gets enlightened, and there's a growth in population, there's always going to be a need for more and ever expanding energy of some kind. Because regardless, and this is actually one of the AGI questions along with quantum computing. If you have an AI that has the brain of quantum computing that has both ones and zeros, actually zeros all the way up to 9, all at the same time, right? So it calculates 1,000,000 times faster. And then also the electrical impulses in a human's brain can only go about the speed of sound, whereas in an AI brain, it can go the speed of light. That's a big difference. In fact, I think that's about, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but about 15 times difference.
It's at least one order of magnitude. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty sure it's multiple orders of magnitudes.
Yeah. Which is a lot faster thinking. Okay. Now, here's the difference though. We humans are able to just literally go hunt a deer, kill it, and then there we go. I'm good to go for like an entire day. I've got my energy, right? Versus a quantum computer like that in an AI like that is gonna need a lot of electricity or something, maybe some plasma or something, right? And so you're always the advancement here is going to be more energy, and that needs to be the focus. So with the idea that we just got done talking about Zenith, about like how, the middle class basically just kind of splits, right? The idea of the robots being there gets filtered in through not economics, right? The economics instead, energy goes here, but instead it's actual energy itself. And since we're according to the Kardashev scale, I'm butchering that name, we're approximately 0.8 out of being a type 1 civilization. So if we're that close, right, there's only a couple of things left that we really need to conquer and able to have take care of the entire energy of the planet, right? And then at that point, then we start moving on into the stars, multi-planet. And so again, it's just all about energy and people doing things with their hands. Remember, always do things with your hands.
Yep. There's a wise man who wrote a whole bunch of books that some people think aren't books, correctly so, who once said that the only thing that matters are goods and services. And it's like, there's something to that.
Feels slightly called out.
Huh? What are you talking about?
Just a teeny bit. I just wanted to pop in here and say, Zenith, to your point, I think what you're saying is that the author is predicting that we're going to turn into literally the Matrix with his description, and we're not quite there yet, and we're resisting that. So, you know, what is the term for the?
Resistance is futile.
The Luddites.
No, the thing that encouraging resistance. Viva la resistance or something like that.
The revolutionaries, inciters.
No, it's like a thing that you're supposed to yell if you're part of a resistance or something. But anyway.
Viva la revolution.
Yeah, something like that. I think that's what I'm thinking of. I don't know what came to my brain.
Could be.
But yeah, so I hope maybe we will never get to that point. But if we do, what you guys are describing right now is basically that's where that would lead. If we do get to a full, complete internet takeover and people will stop doing things with their hands. And I think that's why humans resist it so hard, especially because, you hear all the time, like, they are taking our jobs. People are resisting, like, having self-checkouts being the only way to check out at Walmart now, and like that self-operating Taco Bell and things like that. All of those things take away jobs, and then those people, what are they supposed to do? Well, eventually put them in a container, hook them up to a machine, let them pretend they're living a great life, and they'll be good to go.
Yep, and the rest of us will have our instant Taco Bell Supreme life.
If only. That's the dream, Will. The instant Taco Bell life.
That's all that I want. So
true. All right, folks, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining.
Will, you want that and the ability to go to any store at any point in time and just buy meth right off the shelf.
Correct. Methamphetamines for me. I'm personally more interested in cocaine than methamphetamine, but if methamphetamine is the thing that gets, if people put up more of a fuss to get the meth in the shelves, then hey, more power to them. Like you guys could just go get Adderall. It's way easier. But if you want to do that, then go for it. The point is, like, I want the option is the more important thing than like the tool itself. I'm using the like extreme examples because that's memorable and people will think about it. But the important thing is
morphine would be good too. And with that, Z, take us out of here.
Yes.
That's one hell of a libertarian argument to end on. But yes, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to go around the horn, and I want to ask folks, on our journey of mastery of 0 to 10,000 hours in the cryptocurrency investor space, where does this fall for you? And then who are you? Where can people find you? And what do you have going on? So let's start it off with Mr. Will Stevenson himself. What do you got?
I think that this book is a great book. People should do it within the first 100 hours of learning about stuff, I would say. Now, it's a bit heavy, but like there's a lot of good principles in here, which I think is very important to think about. Now, it's not going to give you a whole bunch of actionable information, which is why I don't put it in like the first 10 hours. So if I'm gonna make a logarithmic decision on should you put it in the 1 hour, the 10 hour, the 100 hour, the 1,000, or the 10,000, right? Like where in that gauge, I would say like in the third tier up, in the 100 hour or thereabouts tier. So like it's good information. It would almost certainly behoove you to have a more formative base before you get into this one, but it's good stuff, and I don't think that you would regret reading it. So that's my thoughts. As far as where can the folks find me, you guys can get all of my socials at will.pls.fyi. I'm actually quite unprepared right now. I do not have all of my copy stuff pulled up for dropping in the chats, but that's where you can find all of my social media is will.pls.fy. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's just Will Stevenson X, and go join bit.ly/hex_meetup if you're a hexkin and you want to meet other hexkins. Hell, if you're not a hexkin, if you just want to learn about cryptocurrency and you want to hang out with some really cool people, then go to bit.ly/hex_meetup. You can also do t.me/hex_meetup. It's the same damn thing. That's all that I've got. That's what's going on with for me in the near future. And Mr. Nate, where can the folks find you? What do you got in the near future? And what do you think of the book? 0 to 10,000.
Yeah, so 0 to 10,000, I do believe that like late, like double digits. I think this is a book that should be read very, very quickly because it really almost kind of like taking the red pill. You need to start understanding concepts first, or understand that there is a concept like that, like being a sovereign individual, before you start really truly trying to like go out there and start doing things on your cryptocurrency, or not even that, just regular investing, just trying to pull yourself out of the machine, to make yourself free. You need to start understanding kind of these concepts. So I would say it's got to be pretty early. You can it's one of my favorite books, by the way. Absolutely love it. I recommend it to everybody, literally.
Good one.
Yeah. So yeah, you can find me on x.com at the Ascending Man 369. I actually just today put along with, by the way, shout out Axis for his Alive token. He got a good launch on that, Axis and Alive. I talked to him Tuesday on my Ascending Man channel. We went into some extreme details about what the project is and all that, and even came up with a couple of possible ideas for like pools and stuff. So really good information there. But I did on my X, if you go over there, you can see that I actually put together my strategy of what I specifically did with that project. It's not financial advice, but it is something to kind of think about when you're thinking about, hey, I want to try and invest in this. What are my options? Well, there's a really good one over there at my X account. So yeah, go ahead, give me a follow. And yeah, I'll just go ahead and move it along over to this lovely lady.
Hello. So for the scale of where to read the book, I agree with Nate and Will. Very early. I think you could probably go as late as like the 200 hours though. But very early, very soon. I think this book resonates a lot with what we're experiencing with cryptocurrency. I mean, as we've said multiple times tonight, he predicted cryptocurrency. So, I mean, you really can't get much closer than that, except for, reading the books that are currently coming out by some of the cryptocurrency people. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. Read the book as soon as you can. If it is long, so be prepared for that. And grab it on Audible. You'll have it whenever you want it. Pop it on in the car whenever you're just driving around bored and you want to absorb more of this knowledge. That's probably what I'm going to do with it, is just kind of play it in the background sometimes when I'm like playing Pokemon, because I play Pokemon all the time. But anyways, as for where you can find me, oh, hang on, I gotta do a thing. I am in the Degen Roundtable Telegram, and if you want to hit me up for whatever reason, we've got thumbnails, production, other such things. Go ahead, send me a message there, and you can do that by going right here. Oh, I made it a little too long. It's a little teeny bit too long, but it works. So scan that QR code, get in there, talk to us. We talk about anything and everything. We've got fitness, we've got crypto, we've got, if we don't have it, tell us and we'll get it in there. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And yeah, that's all I got. Z, take us home.
Will do. Folks, I think that this book personally is in around the 1,000 hours category. These like cyclical history books, I think, are closer towards the 3,000 to 5,000 hours journey, but I think that this one it's a standout and it's exceptional in its own regards. So I would put it at 1,000 hours, if not even sooner. I'm not going to put it before 100 hours just because I think there's a lot more foundational stuff you need to cover before you get to this stuff to be useful. It's very relevant information, and like at the beginning, I guess it's kind of like that Galaxy Brain book where it goes beyond just like the physical things you interact with and really gets you thinking about like how the systems fit and work together and that kind of stuff. So I think that there are critiques of the book, but largely, for a guy that wrote this in 1997, he got a lot correct, very specifically as well. So yeah, because of that's why I think we tout this thing so highly, and I do think it's very relevant to anybody that operates in the crypto space. But yeah, other than that, folks, you can find me, Zenith, at ZenithDI on Instagram and Twitter. shoot me a DM over there, or shoot me a DM in the Telegram, which is down in the QR code that all of us were pointing to earlier. Please at us or talk about anything you want. We will try to respond to you as quickly as we can. But other than that, yes, we will be back on Sunday night for our usual flagship news market analysis show. After that, we have our Wednesday show. We have a special guest coming up. We will announce who that is on Sunday once we get everything firmed up for sure. And after that, we're going to be back next Friday with another book, this time hosted by Will Stevenson. Sir, what do we have planned for Black Friday, I think?
That's a good question. I'm pulling it up right now. And schedule. Oh, we have nothing on the docket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to book suggestions, and I'm going to look at the next thing that I've talked about. Drive.
I want to bring up really quick, if we don't have anything planned, how do you guys feel about doing the one that Moonpill keeps literally suggesting constantly, the devil something by Napoleon Hill?
Outwitting the Devil.
Suggesting that for like months, and I would love to do that for him if we're able to.
I like it. That's what it's going to be then. It's going to be Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. That will be the book that we cover on Book Club next week. Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. You guys heard it here first. Let me go ahead and copy that and put it in the schedule. And that's what we're going to be doing. That's all I got.
Perfect. All right. With that being said, we now have the next 3 shows planned out in most of their entirety. We'll fill in the details when we get there. But that is what we got going on. Folks, thank you so much for joining us tonight on what I think is a very important or memorable episode of the Book Club. We had an absolute pleasure covering all this stuff tonight with you, and we know that time is your most valuable asset. So we always want to thank you whenever you spend it here with us at the Degen Roundtable. And until we catch you guys next time, Sunday, by the way, I hope that everyone out there continues to degen responsibly.